All right. Gonna make sure that this is working. Wait. Yeah. Gonna make sure that this is working properly. I think it is. Yeah, cool. So,
Looks good.
um, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be one of many streams in this regard. I've got lots coming, lots planned. But basically, this is the kind of thing that you'll see on this channel in terms of interviews. I want to interview people that I consider real libertarians, and as those of you who've been following me for some time know, um, I that's a narrowing pool. It's a narrowing pool of people, um, and ultimately the pool narrows ever more whenever like some concession comes up, whenever there's something that people can gain from it, whenever they can gain power, position, money, whatever. And like a lot of people, because libertarianism is a magnet for like actual energy, against various systemic, injustices, they'll, exploit that energy but then redirect it to worse causes. And my goal with this series is I want to highlight real libertarians. I want to highlight libertarians that are actually going to make a difference and who like have principle, the party of principle. And so before we get started too deep, I wanted to read this because I think that this is something that like really crystallized my viewpoint here. Um, and this is a tweet from Hodey Johns, my guest, and I'll read this, and then I'll give you the floor to describe why you were saying this. Um, you can talk as long as you want here. Um, Give me the radical libertarians back. Give me the libertarians who stand between the overzealous cops and the innocent victims, between the abusive parents and the children, between the prison system and those in need of rehabilitation, between the razor wire and the immigrant families, between the centralized treasury and the free market, between the warmongers and the peaceful bystanders, between the endless regulations and the hungry, between the bigot-friendly and the oppressed targets, between the purchased politicians and the poor. I like that one especially. I've had enough of the moderate collectivist capitulating sellout libertarians that excuse or promote government and politicians when it suits their statist desires. I'm done with the libertarians who get hung up on technicalities, philosophy, and social media debates to the point where the innocent suffer or get ignored under their watch. I'm ready for the libertarians who push for inclusive culture, love, and freedom even when some people aren't ready for it yet. Because the people who are ready for it, no matter how few in number, need the radical libertarians back now more than ever. So, what was the primary, I guess, thing that led you to that conclusion?
Really, the immigration debate has been hot this week, and I was embarrassed to see kind of the Libertarian Party join the Republicans and the Democrats in immigration control. It's something that unfortunately people deserve, like a third option. We didn't have it. And I remember there being a discussion like 2 years ago to 4 years ago. It's like, are we really ready to be this radical? Like maybe we should tone it down a little. Maybe we should like quiet down. Maybe we should like capitulate a little more. Maybe we should work within the system a little bit better. And I just don't know. It's funny because like the radicals, I put in quotes, won, but it's been how much it's just like, well, let me defend this status position. Let me defend this status position. Let's stick up for these guys, as opposed to just developing their own identity and doing their own thing. It's just become another political party. And I realize that as off-putting as the radicals may be, and we are off-putting sometimes, I would much prefer some guy who is wildly in favor of, you know, unrestricted freedom of movement, when we're talking public or nationalist property, just let people go to where they need to go to. Let's have that radical idea. And I was just embarrassed to see it go away. And I just got in this, it led to all the things that I list there. I got to thinking all the things that the libertarians should be radical on right now that we're just not, that we're just not good enough on. And of course I say we as I speak to Jeremy Harding, who is obviously not capitulated with the rest of the libertarians or the Libertarian Party. But, that just as the movement as a whole, and I think it's appropriate to talk about this because when we use language to communicate with other people. And right now, when you think of a libertarian, you might have an idea, Jeremy, I might have an idea of what it is. In the public's eye, by far the most libertarian person in the world is Donald Trump. When you think of a libertarian, that's not actually true, but that is what people think. And so because we failed to distance ourselves from Donald Trump, we become lumped into him. So we either need to rescue the word libertarian and make it radical again, or abandon the word and start calling ourselves like freedomites or something like that. So that was basically what was going through my head in that one. Is I was going back and I was thinking about all the positions that we were worried we were going to be too radical on, and because we settled, we failed to become remarkable, and now we're just plain.
Well, and so my thing here is first principles. You've got, if, for instance, your common libertarian wants to advocate the non-aggression principle, you can't advocate the non-aggression principle and also, for instance, support the paleo strategy, which involves, unleashing the cops. And I don't care that the reason that they're doing that is because these people are homeless. A lot of the reason people are homeless is because the system fucked them over, or because there was a natural disaster and no safety
Correct.
net, or because their house burnt down due to bad wiring from an electrician that fucked them over, or, whatever the thing is. Like, there are so many reasons that so many people are homeless, and, say, or like bums, or whatever the fucking right-wingers want to call them, and to pretend that it's not just fucking, that it's not even possible that the person is homeless because of a, reasonable reason. That's absurd. It's atrocious from a libertarian perspective. But what's even worse is saying unleash the cops. And what that's doing now is it's translating to unleash the cops on anybody we don't like. It's translating to people like Sal Mayweather fucking, endorsing Javier Milei to thunderous applause from 20,000 likes. Because he said that he posted a video of police brutality over there and said, finally, the commies are getting what they deserve. And it's like, no, those people are angry that half their money was stolen from them just now. Like, that's what he did. He halved the value of the Argentinian peso against the dollar.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. Milei was supposed to, and he is in some ways standing up to the centralized economic system, but then taking the victims of that centralization and the police. I wrote some bullet points. It's funny you mentioned that right off the bat because I have at the top of the list here, homeless. We used to talk about how we help them the most. And now the conversation is it technically okay to release the police against the homeless? And that is so far away. Like a radical solution. That is it's just an NPC basic GOP standard right-winger fascist talking point that they've been doing forever. Maybe we can police the homeless to death or out of existence, as opposed to what the libertarian movement used to stand for. This is Mary Rupert, Healing Our World, talking about how freedom and markets are so well equipped to handle this, and how cultures and societies aggressively dislike homelessness much more than the state does, and how we offer this solution. And instead, libertarians found themselves selling out to being like, oh yeah, we're finally unleashing the cops on the homeless. Like, yeah, they have all their mental health and drug and everything issues. And as opposed to talking about how free markets can handle those issues, we're talking about how the state can fix that issue for us and just make them here. And it's embarrassing. It's hateful, like right off the bat, which I think is fine to say, even if we don't want to be philosophy wonks or principles like you're talking about. It's very unprincipled to be unleashing the cops against victims. But secondly, or to collectivize, even if some of them aren't victims, collectivize all homeless people as the same. They all are drug addicts or all have mental health issues, and I don't feel like dealing with it, so I'm going to punish all of them with the police. Even abandoning principles for a moment, I just think get in touch with your conscience and your spirit and just recognize that that is a very hateful thing to do, a terrible thing to do. And it's okay. In fact, I think if you're a true libertarian, instead of thinking through the lens of the state or not state, because that's very binary, very basic, very liberty, I want to say 101, but I don't even want to give it that. It's just very like pre-libertarian to think about it in terms of state or not state. You're supposed to be saying cool or not cool, good or not good, positive or negative, as opposed to just thinking of it purely in terms of philosophy. People aren't philosophy. People are people, and they're governed by our philosophies. And which is why if we're going to govern people with philosophy, we want to govern them with a good, loving philosophy and culture, as opposed to having this. I think it's one of the things that led to our current state is we towed the line with the non-aggression principle and said, is this technically, it's like being a Christian and being like, is this technically sin? Or if you're in a marriage, technically cheating? As soon as you're asking those questions, you didn't really understand marriage. It's about maximizing love, not minimizing hate or minimizing cheating, right? Like liberty is supposed to be like bringing as much liberty as possible. So the non-aggression principle is a baseline. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. But let's not toe that line. The point of that line is to get as far away from it as possible. And because we didn't distance ourselves from that, we played around with it. We found ourselves in that area. Possible. It's kind of like the person who's like, well, it's not technically cheating to go to strip clubs or technically cheating. My wife doesn't have to know if I'm having these lunches with all these people. And then surprise, surprise, you end up finding a moment of weakness and you slip over the other side, because you've made it really easy, as opposed to being very open. The radical solution: be radically open with your wife. Take her place is informed, even if you don't think she cares, and even if you think she trusts you. Keep her ultra informed. Let her know. That would be the radical marriage. Religion is the radical deployment of love, not just like, did I technically sin? You're not a very good Christian if you're just technically avoiding sin. That's not the point. You're supposed to be immersing yourself in love and liberty. And unfortunately, the movement, instead of embracing liberty and maximizing liberty, giving people stuff and spreading around this good word, we found ourselves being like, is this technically the right thing to do? And as soon as you have to ask yourself that, you're not doing liberty right, and you definitely shouldn't be a representative of it.
Well, and like beyond that, like, so for instance, like the libertarian movement is faced up against this impossibly huge bureaucracy. It's faced off against like just the biggest empire in history, the like single most complicated form of government that has ever existed. And now is the time to show people that it could be a lot simpler. It could be a lot better. But you know what they're doing? They're getting us wrapped in a bunch of legalese arguments. They're getting us wrapped up in a bunch of bullshit where we're trying to ask, well, if it meets standard A, B, C, D, and E, like, maybe we can justify certain amounts of statism. And no, like, my whole deal is like, libertarian party or not, politics or not, we should be trending for zero government. And if somebody isn't doing that, then they're not a libertarian. If somebody isn't trending toward trying to eliminate as many things in the way of human freedom as possible, then they're not a libertarian. And that includes the state in forms of the banks, the corporations, the media, the fucking international money lending organizations, the, hegemonies that are building up everywhere in order to, crush the human spirit. Like, there are so many things that are moving parts in this giant matrix of state capitalism that Rothbard even admitted existed. And when you don't even admit at a baseline that your brother could potentially be right, or that somebody is wrong because they're from another side of an arbitrary line in the form of borders, like, that's never going to result in liberty. That's only going to result in your society claiming that that they have rights that other societies don't by virtue of their placement in a location. And like that's like the whole jingoistic xenophobic root of the war machine, which is the root of the rest of the state, because war is the health of the state, and once you base your policies on bloodshed, you might as well fucking, axe any hope of freedom here at home too. You know, once that happens, you're fucked. So like if you like base your entire view of liberty on the same shit that the state bases their shit on, then you're only ever going to get the state. And the state trends toward expansion. It has to. It's mechanistically for that. So like if you're going to do the exact same shit that the state did, you're going to get the exact same thing that this state is. And so many libertarians just refuse to understand that.
Yeah, when you allow the government to do something, it doesn't do it the way you want to do it. It does it on its own terms. Like this is with the border issue, a lot of people are like, well, I just want it more. Of course, I want it more streamlined, and I want it to be, it's not obviously everybody knows the issues with like immigrants, right? Like it sometimes can feel like pulling teeth to get the right wingers to admit it, but getting them to admit that there's a ton of unnecessary fees, that there's all these stupid tests, there's years of waiting depending on what country you're from, decades of waiting if you're doing it legally. Unfortunately, sexual assaults on in these camps, and because it's ICE, they just reshuffle. Like they used to do with teachers, right? Just reshuffle them back to a different location along the border, as opposed to being like, dude, you're fired. You sexually assaulted an immigrant, right? So we know of all these issues. Now, it's not really even contended among anybody. But the issue that I have with this is this is how the state does it. When you authorize the state to do something, you're not authorizing to do it, but well, you're authorizing them to do it, and they'll determine how it gets done. Look no further than the welfare state. And of course, nobody wants corporate welfare, but that's what they do because they're in charge and you're not, right? So we don't get to decide that. But I want to throw a bone, if I can, to the minarchists for a moment, because I think the problem that the current Libertarian Party has now is that they're no longer even minarchists about the border. Because a minarchist would be pushing harder than minarchists would for open border about all the grievances and all these terrible things happening along the border. And what you do is instead see people who call themselves minarchists who just say, okay, maybe a little state along the border is okay. But what they're doing is they're authorizing everything, and they're just constantly, they're taking the murder of Laken Riley, which is a terrible thing, and just saying, yeah, an illegal immigrant murdered a person. Now, this is why we have to get harsh on it, or get harsher on it, as opposed to saying this is a terrible thing. Here's the responsible way to do it. They're not defending the minarchist. They're not constantly out there being like, hey, we need to get rid of these fees. We need to get rid of these camps. We need to streamline this process. We need to make this better. They're constantly just defending the current situation of closing the border and making it even more closed. Most of them are for completing the wall. Most of them are for more ICE agents, for more control of this border. So they've abandoned even the minarchist position at the point. Like you and I are pushing for no government, but they're not even pushing for a little government anymore. They're pushing for as much government as it takes at the border. And of course, if you pull teeth, they might be like, well, the current system's not great, but they're not out championing what that better minarchist position. They're out championing the system, and then wanting, they show you the floods of immigrants and then act all terrified as though our ancestors weren't unhuddled masses on ships, right? But they show you a whole bunch of immigrants and go, oh no, isn't this terrifying? Like, we absolutely have to do something about this invasion or whatever. And it is just so, you can tell that it's a completely given to a big government solution, because they're not championing any small government solutions. And it beyond immigration, they've been doing it with welfare. They've been collectivizing people. They've been doing this with parents and raising children. Just this, oh, maybe it's okay for this. The pro-life libertarians, for the longest time, were like, well, the state's a terrible solution for this. Like, we need to push a culture that encourages life. Here are the things, like being a person who is willing to give up your home or a room, that can help you have a person change their decision. I can tell you, having worked at a hospital that performed abortions, like the number one detriment to getting it done would be a loving family member who can take care and support you. And pro-life libertarians totally realize this for the longest time. And we're just like, yeah, government is wholly irresponsible at handling the situation. Let's create a culture and a society so that life happens. But instead, what you see is, let's drop the plank. Maybe government's okay in that situation. And then as the GOP, I even have a friend who's a strategist with the GOP from back in my days when I was with them, was just said, we bit off so much more than we could chew. We assured people just reasonable abortion restrictions. We didn't do that. We did force people to give birth to their rapist child. We did force people to die. We did do things that made the hospital so scared to act that they just ended up having a no abortion policy. And under any circumstances, even when the mother's life is in danger, all these things that you were assured, rape and incest, and hey, if the mother's life's in danger, all those things that they assured us wouldn't happen, the GOP did. And what happened to libertarians? They took the wrong side. They took the big government side. They didn't even take some government side. They took the big government side. And it's just, this is the non-radical, because I want people to understand how non-radical this is, because radical has been confused in libertarian circles with being a butt munch, like being like a jerk to people. But like, that's not what being radical for your philosophy is. I mean, Jesus was radical, and everybody who hated him had to go visit Jesus. Jesus wasn't visiting the people he hated. He didn't hate anybody. He loved everybody, right? Like, he's visiting people that's radical, right? It's not radical to be like what the GOP did. Yep, that's good sometimes. That's okay. Joe Biden finishing off the border. Yeah, that's probably for the best. Yeah, shutting down all immigration for a year. That's probably good. This is the most, like, it is so non-radical. It is so non-libertarian. And it really makes me sad that the people who are considered like extremists are the ones that advocate for this just because they have a piss poor presence on social media. They're jerks to people. They drive people away. And people are like, ooh, they drive people away. They make it so unpopular. They're so extreme and radical. Really, you've just made the popular position sound even more unappealing than it is. That's really all they've managed to accomplish, especially when you look at the state of the party electorally.
Well, and like, so that's a good thing. Like, I really think the border issue is an interesting one to go on because, like, Ron Paul was famous for saying sanctions are an act of war. And Ron Paul was famous for saying this because they are. When you fuck up a country by, like, eliminating, fucking their ability to be self-sufficient, when you fucking, like, sanction their fucking trade, when you put all these restrictions on their ability to do business with similar countries that are in your hegemony, when you, like, bomb countries that are also complicit in their economic feasibility and viability, when you cut off anybody who shares their ideology, when you do all this because you're trying to maintain the fucking, like, working parts of, like, the Cold War era intelligence agencies that, like, are honestly just spawns of Nazism to begin with. When you do all that, and continually choke out an economy, and you're doing that because that economy is rejecting your state capitalist society, your neoliberal world, and your globalism to begin with, those societies will eventually have to be self-sufficient. And if you then create a war on drugs, which creates cartels, and a war on terror, which creates terror organizations, and you do all of this like these countries are eventually going to have internal instability, and then all you've got to do is exploit that instability to install your preferred dictators and, you know, fucking corporations and banks and shit. And after a certain point, there will be no other option than yours. There will be no other option than, you know, fucking your economy, your government, your state, your banks, your corporations, unless they want, you know, to be completely choked out. And so then they'll be forced to capitulate, or they'll, you know, ask for certain things, make certain demands so that, you know, they can still have any amount of national sovereignty. And then your government will, like, you know, say, no, in fact, unless you just completely become our bitch, you will not have any play in this global economy. You know, that's the kind of thing that destroys countries, that destroys economies. That's the kind of thing that has been used to destabilize Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, certain, you know, other Asian countries, fucking certain places in Europe. Certainly Russia has been the target of American fucking, like, foreign policy for a significant period of time, and now they're using Ukraine as a vassal state in form of that. Palestine has been experiencing genocide for the past 100 years, like over 100 at this point. And they've been, you know, fucking gradually being pushed out and bombed and fucked with and controlled by a US-backed power because they're affiliated with Iran, who's also heavily sanctioned. And all of this is creating this environment where all of these countries have fucked up internal conditions, and those fucked up internal conditions, especially in places like Venezuela, which has been perhaps one of the harshest sanctioned countries on the fucking planet, that suddenly creates a migrant flow from those places where those people cannot afford to live in their home, and where those people are consistently fucked out of their homes, and then those people come to the place which has the money. For some reason, this place has the prosperity and the money. I wonder why. Could it be because they've been controlling this whole joint this whole fucking time? Could it be that this is a consequence of American actions and the Western actions, that there's a migrant flow from those countries to begin with? Could it be that we could end the war on drugs and terror and the, you know, military and intelligence industrial complexes that come with it, and that would stem migration fucking way more than ICE ever could? No, just blame the fucking migrants and use violence at the border. We don't have enough government violence. That's the new libertarian position at this point.
Right, and this you bring it. I mean, let's bring this back to like the principle of it, because I love that you're bringing up the foreign involvement in this, because this is one point where the current, you know, the poor state of the current liberty movement had this right, because they would bring up like, hey, these sanctions against Russia are wrong and they're going to have some backlash, and like against China are wrong and they're going to have backlash. We want to punish like a government, and we said instead we impose a sanction. And just like how you don't tax a business, you tax their consumers and their employees and their product. That's the same thing. You sanction a country. You didn't sanction Saddam Hussein. He still had his gold toilet. You just sanctioned people living under his regime. You know, this is a good example. I mean, to bring up the immigration bit part of this is that it's like we destabilize their nations, we refuse to let their migrants in, but only for countries where they really have seen the absolute terrors of government and are going to a place that has less government on purpose, right? They're passing through all these big government nations to get to a place with less government. Or more social freedoms, especially, or the ability to, you know, work freedoms, you know, versus some of these other nations. And then what'll happen is these politicians, since they control the border, they make it really easy for somebody who comes from a place where government's considered a good, like in Europe, like, oh, to migrate from Europe is relatively inexpensive and relatively quick. I had a family member do it, right? Like pretty snappy. Bumped up to the front of the line. This person who came over absolutely loves government. Absolutely had great glowing things to say about the control of right. But, and so she's bringing those philosophies here to the United States. All these other people who are like, our government's failed us, get out of the way and let us work. we're not going to let that happen. Well, of course politicians do it this way because they want to bring people in who want to bolster the government and keep people out who are going to be a problem for the government, right? Like, what did you think political control of the border was going to look like? You think they're going to let a bunch of freedom fighters in? You think they're going to keep a bunch of big government people out? Please. Like seriously, stop making it about welfare when it's clearly, when you make something politically controlled, they're going to consolidate political power. And I learned all this from the current people who are now calling for closing the border. They've changed their minds on this issue, unfortunately, because they've embraced some really bad philosophy. And you look at, I learned about the Uyghur genocide from some of these people who are now denying that it happened because and they'll do something. There's a tolerance. This is one of the notes that I wanted to get to. There is a tolerance for getting lied to that is way too high with the current libertarian party movement. Like, if you get lied to, now I'm not saying we don't forgive anybody who lies or who misquotes something, a heat of the moment thing, or makes a mistake, apologizes for it, fine. But they're denying things that are factually true, like what's happening with the Uyghurs in China. Because, of course, they want to avoid war with China. And so if you tell the truth about what's happening with Uyghurs, they'll say, oh, you're just carrying water for the CIA or the current regime. When in reality, liberty used to always be about individualism and how those individual lives are precious and what can we do to protect them from being oppressed? What can we do to help these people? And the liberty movement used to realize this. I learned about the horrors of Putin in Russia from these same people who were taking Kremlin talking points. These people who are just totally in Putin's pocket. Many of them even work for Russia today, calling themselves libertarians in America and acting like that is just, sure, I work for Russian propaganda, government-sponsored propaganda studio. Oh, but I'm really a small government activist. Like, please. But you were the one telling me about how bad this stuff was, and now you're out here talking about just taking. There was one of the libertarians in the party, one of the communications guys, who was like, listen to Putin's speech. He didn't lie a single time, and I did a fact check on this one. It took me forever. But, there are hundreds of lies in this. It's not even close. Just basic things like saying the population of a country was double it actually is. Goofball lies that he was telling left and right. But they so want to avoid war with Russia that they're willing to lie and throw individuals under the bus. And it stopped becoming about the principle of individualism and started becoming about collectivism because they've let go of that, like you talked about, Jeremy, the principle that every individual life is sacred. We are here for individuals. All individuals have inalienable rights, whether you think they're from God or from nature, that cannot be transgressed against. And we have just suddenly been like, well, maybe it's okay to alienate those rights sometimes. That's not what individualism is. So it's funny that some of these guys who proclaim to hate collectivism because it's associated with communism and socialism have completely embraced collectivism. One immigrant shoots a civilian, close down the border. Does that make any sense if somebody who got a speeding ticket robs a store? So if you get a speeding ticket, if only we locked them away for life. If all the white people who have a tendency to commit these mass shootings for whatever reason, well, I guess if we illegalized all white people, we'd have a lot less mass shootings. Maybe we should get on that. It's baloney on its face. It's baloney collectivism on its face. Nobody serious would bring this up in any logical debate, but the libertarian movement is covered with this. An apologia for Putin, for China, for the worst of the worst government offenses right now. They're not only not radical libertarians, they're not really libertarians on these issues. They can stand for it on a few with economy. But we look at the Libertarian Mises Caucus, they had in their platform they weren't going to get involved with cultural stuff. And within 2 months, I think, of winning her election, McCardle just said on her Twitter, hey, it's all about the culture war. 100%. We're not doing anything but the culture war. I don't think she said doing anything but it. I don't want to do the quote here, but she's like, it's all in on the culture war right now. So they went from like, hey, we aren't going to comment on the culture war to all we're going to do now is fight about the culture war. And it's like, because it was never based in a principle, it was just based in like power. It was based in, I mean, depending on how you see it, it might have been based in co-opting the entire party, but yeah.
Well, and like, that's a good example because, okay, so so many of these libertarians are all about saying that, you know, oh, the LGBT, they're groomers, the fucking et cetera, et cetera. They're on board with that because they're fascist hacks who disguise themselves. And I can prove that because they had this Rage Against the War Machine rally, and this was just working actively with tankies, pro-war tankies who wanted Russia to fucking win. And these people, these pro-war tankies, included a pro-war pedophile named Scott Ritter, twice convicted child sex predator, Scott Ritter. He tried to fuck kids twice, and we're very fortunate that they weren't kids, they were cops, but the fact that that happened twice and his only comment to anyone was not of contrition, was not of I'm going to try to do better, be better, wasn't admitting he did anything wrong, it's that he was pissed it was made public. That's evidence, that's all you need to know about him. He will cover up his own corruption at the, like, you know, fucking at any level possible in order to, like, run cover for the sort of people that, like, you know, control bricks. You know, fucking, and this was, like, way back. This was a while ago. Long enough ago that he's shown up on enough fucking podcasts and bullshit that people have washed his image. So, like, this was authentically surprising to some people when it was brought up. And one of the people that, like, facilitated his rise back to the top was Thaddeus Russell, who literally has, as part of his Patreon rewards, that if you, like, by the way, I'll say this, if you subscribe to my Patreon, I promise to not promote a pedophile as one of the rewards. You'll just, you know, you'll help me make anarchist content, and you don't need to support pedophilia to support my Patreon, unlike Thaddeus Russell's Patreon, which actively supports a fucking pedophile, because one of his fucking rewards in his Patreon thing is, like, a fucking conversation between him and Ritter. Like, that's exclusive content, is the privilege of talking to a pedophile. And, like, Thaddeus Russell himself had this giddy little conversation where he minimized child sex abuse with a guy named Stephen Kirshner. And Stephen Kirshner wrote an entire book defending adult child sex. And Thaddeus Russell, during that fucking, like, fallout from that shit, he said that a 13-year-old should be able to have sex with their professor for better grades. And, like, that if I find that disgusting, he said this to me personally, if I find that disgusting, I am an imperialist. And so, like, these are the people, and then Scott Ritter says he hopes Russia puts Ukraine down like a rabid dog. He gets applause at an anti-war rally, and then what happens? All these people who say that, oh, the LGBT people, they're the groomers. These people support Putin when he bans LGBT people as an extremist organization, and they still call themselves libertarians while saying Putin was right, while literally defending Putin and saying he's a Chad in this interview with Tucker Carlson, and, you know, saying that, you know, oh, this is why they don't want Putin to win, because he's sticking it to them wokes. Well, fuck you. I would rather side with the wokes than the Putins of the world. If that makes me a commie to not side with Putin, then fucking good.
Absolutely. And this is when it comes down to, you towed the line with, you know, with people like Ritter, where it's just like, well, I mean, I think that that's way over the line. But, you know, you say, oh, we'll, you know, kind of blur it up. But if you attend a gay rally or a pride rally, no, you're a groomer. You're just another one of those groomers. And you know, we punch all groomers in the face or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you don't. Right. Like, you're so full of it. And I think it's posturing. It strikes me as, like, they fancy themselves like these alpha omega people when they're really just kind of like I don't know, this type of like posturing because I want to be viewed this certain way, but I don't want to actually live this certain way, to me is just very like very very castrated. It's very like I'm just the liberty has got no balls on it anymore. And these are the same people who would insult a trans person for having a surgery, even as an adult, right? Like, I mean, these are the same people that say, based on all the Matt Walsh videos and everything, where it's just, or Michael Knowles, and talk about illegalizing all this as an adult. And I mean, if you want to think they're castrated because they've chosen to transition to a female, you don't see, you're not holding up a mirror, because you've been much more castrated by statism than they have. You are not living a life of like maximum freedom. And it's just, it to me, like, if you have to toe that line, like, then you're not getting the point. I'm going to keep coming back to that, because I think that that's where we went wrong, is we a lot of times, and about more things than just the liberty movement, like expanding this to just human beings. If we know something is bad, a lot of times we ask ourselves, well, is this technically bad? Is this technically bad? Instead of distancing ourselves from it. And because we didn't distance ourselves from the statist positions on the culture war, and I'll admit too, I was part of this problem, because while I appreciate the nice things you say about me, Jeremy, I did not speak up when you did about the LPMC. And I had to eat bad crow on that one. I have no problem talking smack about it now. But I mean, I even endorsed one of their candidates. Like, I mean, 6 years ago, whenever Josh Smith ran, one of those times, I didn't do it for the next couple, but like, I thought, I was like, yeah, I don't love the fact that they've abandoned the culture bit. They're kind of giving into the GOP populism on culture. But, mostly they're about Austrian economics, and I like Austrian economics, so that sounds good. But you look at how they backstabbed all the Austrians. I mean, Mises backstabbed, Hayek backstabbed, Bastiat backstabbed. I mean, they just like, they let go of all the economic stuff that would have made them good, while officially taking no position on the culture war for a little bit, until becoming, because they abandoned Austrian economics, all about the wrong side of the culture war, the big state side of the culture war. And it's because you flirted with it and you didn't distance from it. And, hate has that kind of pull, that kind of intoxication to it, where you just kind of say, well, if I keep towing the line, if I keep playing it, well, one of those times you're just going to fall over, and you just see them falling over and over, for these stories nowadays. And it's just so embarrassing to see them defend like January 6th and Russia. And I mean, bin Laden. I mean, goofy stuff, like stuff that just makes you, it's funny because they're using the terms like, I just consider you a deeply as person if you think the border should be open. All right, Mr. like Letter to America by Osama bin Laden radically changed my life. Please tell me how I'm a deeply unserious person for promoting a freedom position as opposed to a government position on the border. Like, they existed as cult, like we all get each other's backs. I know you've been the brunt of this way harder than I have, Jeremy, but like how much they will, like, even if they're the wrongest of wrongs, like one of their own mentions, like makes a joke about killing a trans person to a trans person, that they're just fall all over each other supporting their own. And that kind of support system makes you feel like, well, maybe we're right. Everybody else, hey, I said this terrible thing and I got a bunch of likes. Maybe I should keep saying terrible things and getting a bunch of likes. But functional racists and functional pedophiles, like you're talking about within the party, or, I mean, self-confessed, like they don't like using the term racist, but total eugenicists within the party, talking about how like, oh yeah, we can breed better human beings. Well, at some point you've gone way over the line of what freedom is. You've embraced this very toxic culture, and should I be any surprised that politics, since it's downstream from culture, which everybody should know, that's a Breitbart quote, by the way. That's like a right-leaning quote, is that politics is down from culture. I know the right has kind of tried to reject that nowadays, but you've poisoned the culture well. What did you think your politics was going to turn into? Of course you abandon your principles, because you embrace this toxic culture, or at the very least said it was unimportant. and then let others. And then what did you get that was downstream from that? You got big government immigration, big government on war, big government on police. I mean, you've just embraced all these big government positions, and it's just embarrassing for all the times that these people trashed on. And I do think that this is one of the factors that led to this, was that it was a backlash to people that did deserve backlash. Kind of some. I mean, Sarwark is just, as far as people go, he is one of my least favorite people.
I call him Sarweasel.
All the lefties that defended like the EPA. There was, I mean, I can't even believe there was a debate on this, but about forced vaccinations and a libertarian taking the forced vaccination side. Some of them still, Joe Biden is like, yes, this is who we have to be voting for. Like, but as much as you point out, has all those lefties sided with big government on these subjects, you are now doing the exact same thing as them, because you were more about being anti-left than you were about being pro-liberty. And because you didn't have that ground, you weren't grounded in principles, you just allowed your anti-left mentality to just carry you further and further down this statist stream, to the point where it's hard to even say, like, the common person now, as I mentioned at the beginning here, thinks of Donald Trump as the most libertarian person. It used to be Gary Johnson. I would much rather have it be Gary Johnson than Donald Trump. I would much rather it be like Jeremy Harding or Mary Ruwart or Hodey Johns or something. I love myself. I'll throw myself up on Chris Spangle. I would much rather have some of these people be thought of than Gary Johnson even. But even so, I'll take Gary Johnson over Donald Trump as the torchbearer for liberty when people generally tend to think about it. And that's what you need to understand. If you're going to be in professional communications, as these people are who are on social media, and they're like, look at all this traction I'm getting. Well, you need to understand it's not just about traction. It's about the message you're communicating. And you've communicated that you and Donald Trump are basically the same thing. And yeah, you're like, oh, we criticize him occasionally, and, we do it a little bit. And yeah, but as more than even just being anti-Trump or anti-Biden, you're not saying things that are pro-liberty. You get really scared when it comes to the border. You get really, really scared when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You tiptoe around it. You try to dance around it a little bit. And like you said, Jeremy, I mean, sponsoring events where somebody says that they need to put Ukraine down like a rabid dog, and then having the guys speak, what are you thinking? I mean, just nutty stuff with what they're doing, that when you look on it, and it's been a quick journey. Like, a lot of this has happened within the last two-ish years. The tide for that journey certainly started well before 2 years ago. But in the media's eyes, a lot of this just began like 2 years ago. And it's been a sad fall apart situation. Liberty has definitely done this before historically. We've caved to some radical, I say in quotes, factions that ended up just being like paleos that ended up joining the GOP afterwards anyway. But, got taken over. They did their thing. It was stupid. It didn't last long, and then it went back to kind of its normal thing. Now, I have a problem with the normal Libertarian Party as is, and I think there's a lot of fixes that need to be done there already. But when I'm specifically looking at the current state of liberty, the current state has made it hard for me to even call myself a libertarian. Gary Johnson, I'm fine to be associated with. Donald Trump, no thank you. I mean, that's as bad a no thank you as Joe Biden, and I have a strong no thank you about both.
Well, yeah, and like, on that score, it's funny that these people are all about, ooh, we have to, we're against the three-letter agencies. But then as soon as one of their guys seems to be adjacent to the three-letter agencies, they capitulate. Like, for instance, Pinochet was a direct installation of the CIA, and he worked with Nazis who were a direct, runoff from CIA-supported Nazi evacuations post-World War II, like Paperclip and the Gehlen organization. Reinhard Gehlen, for those of you who don't know, was ratlining Germans out of World War II after World War II ended, and it was all in exchange for spying on Russia. Or helping with programs against Russia. And so these people, like the Operation Cyclone, fucking the boosting of the terrorists, the people who would eventually become Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, ISIS, ISIL, the Taliban. Those people were all rooted in that Cyclone funding and subsequent funding of the projects that were sister projects of Cyclone. And the Ukrainian situation. They've been a vassal state of the US since they started to install media figures, politicians, and fucking other sorts of people in the late 40s and mid 50s. And that was aerodynamic and muscular. You can see all the project papers on official declassified CIA shit. And so when you talk about this sort of thing, like when these people say that, oh, I don't like the three-letter agencies, the feds can suck my dick, you know, blah blah blah, I'm gonna go 3D print a gun and then etch a suspiciously underage girl into it. Like there's a significant underclass of these people in liberty, you know, in fucking liberty circles. And I'm not, you know, by the way, the 3D printed gun community is not all those people. Some of those people are legit. You know who I'm talking about, Pan. But, like, basically, all of these things, like, they're all sort of, like, clustered. And so if somebody says that they support bin Laden's letter to America, after it's been proven that bin Laden is Tim Osman, a CIA asset, after all of the documents came out proving that the U.S. government funded his camp in Khost and helped train his people, you're literally accepting CIA propaganda because it doesn't like the people you claim to hate. And you're saying that this makes you base. It doesn't. You fucking suck. Fuck you. And this happened with Pinochet and his installation. Yeah, Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, the whole, like, one of the things that has become common, unfortunately, is this, like, see this horrible thing and have somebody just be like, these libertarians we're talking about, be like, oh yeah. And it's like, man, I don't even know what to say. Because, like, what you're talking about, these guys are such awful people. And I think that, I mean, that touches on my earlier point, where we need to start being able to be like, not to step away from your principles, but to get so out of your butt on how I can defend this philosophically, and just being able to be like, hey, that's a crappy thing to do, right? Like underpaying your workers while you get like cutting, what, like I'm in the video games industry, right? So the cutting like 50% of your staff in the middle of a year of record profits, as opposed to reinvesting it into like more people or better wages or other games or, you know, something like that. Like, it's a crummy thing to do. And they want to be like, well, technically under capitalism, maybe it's okay. Like, it's like, first of all, we're under Keynesianism. The capitalists tried to stop it. So stop defending the current system, like, as though that makes you some kind of like anti-statist. Like, the capitalists got their butts kicked by Keynes, and that's what we have. So criticizing the current system is not criticizing capitalism. Capitalists, you're going to need to get on it. Like, if you consider yourself an ANCAP, you should be so hypercritical of the evils going on within this system. And you're right now, you're leaving it to, currently, like, commies have a higher moral position than you do. And that's a very bad thing, because I mean, as a person who considers himself a capitalist, that is a very embarrassing thing for them to be like, them to be the one that are correcting the Keynesian system, as opposed to you. But I mean, secondly, as opposed to talking about like getting so like up in your butt about economics and philosophy and ideologies, recognize bad behavior and just be like, oh, that's bad behavior. That sucks. People shouldn't do that. Oh, somebody just told the trans person to go kill themselves. That's bad. Right? Like, it's very simple what we're asking for here is just to be like, oh, yeah, I see bad, I say bad, you know? Or if you don't like calling out bad behavior, if you prefer non-confrontation, then show us an example of good. Show us an example of good and inclusion and how you do it right, as opposed to spending all your time like, and because this is the issue, right? When you, I know I go back to this a lot, but when you flirt with that edge, then it's only a matter of time before Pinochet is based, and your community largely does this. I mean, you had like prominent members in LP state parties do the thing where the person types out N, then the other one does I, and they spell the N word out, right? Like, because they're a bunch of clowns, you know. It's like, good job, you spelled the N word out. Like, you're a bunch of fun-loving jokesters. Like, what what do you, like, at least recognize bad. I understand they have the right to say it or the right to do it, but maybe stop thinking about everything in terms of they have rights and start looking at it like a libertarian does, and stop saying, oh, legal or not legal, and say good or not good, because that's what the libertarian mentality does. Is it good or not good? I'm not saying status or not status, good or not good. And if you say racism is not good, then either call it out or be a good example of how to not be a racist, right? Like these are, and racism, guys, very, very collectivist as well, right? I know you deleted your little bigotry plank in your platform, so now bigotry is like, you know, kind of tolerable within the liberty movements. And as we've shown, you flirted with it, and now you've got it, right? It's like, I don't want to jump in the toxic waste, but I'm going to hang around it, and then finding out you've got cancer. It's radioactive. Bad stuff is radioactive. Treat it like radioactive, like it's radioactive. Get away from it and do a healthy thing. Get very, like, man, especially for all the health nuts that are in the liberty movement, right? Like, who are working out a lot and taking good care of themselves, you should recognize this analogy. If you're consuming things that are bad for your body and live a lifestyle that is not generating muscle mass, you know what you will become. It's not a big mystery. So stop treating what has happened to the libertarian movement like a big mystery. Like, oh, I really had hopes. I thought this was going to work out. Well, it's time to learn your lesson. Sitting on the couch, eating marshmallows all day and doing no activity got you fat, gross, and ugly. And flirting with racists, constantly making excuses for collectivists, constantly making excuses for government, for the GOP, for Biden, for Trump, guess what? It got you fat, gross, and lazy. And that, because that's what you consumed. You consumed that media, you became that media. You know, there's that saying, like, the wolf that there's two wolves inside of you, and the one that wins is the one that you feed. So no surprise, they fed the collectivist wolf and they became collectivists. And I hope I am collectivizing a little as well. I guess I'm generalizing the people that I'm talking about, because obviously there are some people who are, I mean, Sal, you mentioned, like, I know he's still an open borders libertarian. Great, right? Like, good. So there is at least something. I'm aware that not everybody is in lockstep. This is not a cult of personality, you know, when I talk about some of these people. So I don't mean to do that. But what I'm saying is you need to be able to recognize a general tendency that's happening and work against it, especially if you're close to them. You know, one of the things that I've found is, like, a video gamer and a Christian and a liberty lover and a barbecue enthusiast, is there's no way, like, as a Christian, how much am I going to change the atheist community's mentality? If there are poor anti-theists that are, like, acting like the equivalent of, like, the Westboro Baptist Church, right? How far can I get being like, hey, atheists, stop doing this, stop doing this? Oh, I can get a big following dunking on atheists, but I'm not going to make much of a difference. Like, nobody's going to, because atheists aren't listening to me. I'm not an atheist. You know, they're not going to, why would they take my advice? But the impact I make as a Christian when I call out other Christians on their bad behavior, or I demonstrate beneficial or alternative Christian lifestyles that are in keeping with the Gospels and with the message of Christ, then I have a lot more success. So what's happened is, unfortunately, good libertarians, and again, I fault myself at this, especially early on, I didn't see the toxicity, or when I didn't speak up as quickly as I should have. And I'm not trying to say, like, a one strike and you're out kind of policy. I think even, like, bad racism, we can be like, hey, let's have a talk, let's have a heart to heart, let's fix it, let's do what we got to do and get you on the right path. Or, hey, I don't want to, that was a really bad mistake, let's fix it, let's get you on the right path. But what happens is when you don't tend to it at all, like, it's like rescuing an apple when part of it goes bad. You cut off the bad part, you can save the whole apple. You leave the bad part, it not only consumes that apple, it consumes all the apples around it. This is why one bad apple spoils the bunch. So when you leave a bad apple to fester, as is what happened with the libertarian party movement, is they got one bad apple, they let it spoil, and it did end up spoiling a lot of them. And so a lot of people got out, they abandoned their barrel, and that's fantastic. But I wish, and I'm sure others join me in wishing, that we had seen those bad apples sooner. And instead of being like, you know what, it's one little dark spot, I'm not going to worry about it too much, it had been, I'm going to be ultra vigilant about dark spots here, because it's really important that we don't do that. I host the Love First Christians, and we occasionally have somebody who gets frustrated and starts to promote violence, not on a government level, but like on a personal level. And I have to say, like, no, I got to nip it right there. We're not going to entertain it. We're not going to dance with it. We're not going to joke with it. I understand what these people are going through. I love them. I care about them. I still allow them to be part of my group. I want them to have a positive influence, but I don't allow that message to be associated with us. And I wish that I had done that more when I was with the Libertarian Party, and when I had those experiences, that I had spoken up when I first saw these things, because I saw the inklings there, right? There was that kind of like, tell a gay joke here or there, but you know what? Maybe a gay person's in on it. Maybe I'll just let it go. And then it just became full on. If you attend Pride, you're a groomer, right? Like it just, that's the mainstream pervading non-controversial opinion you have there. And it certainly would have been very controversial 2.5 years ago. And now it's mainstream. And so you got to ask yourself, why did that happen? And really have a good, honest look with yourself about what you can do to fix it next time, because it does involve some self-criticism. I'm upset with myself that I didn't call it out when I did. I'm happy where I'm at now, and I'm glad that I learned the lesson. I don't regret the way my life has gone, but if I could turn back time, would I change that? Oh, absolutely, I would be changing that. And I hope more people are like that and have the introspection to be able to be like, done to make it better. And I think there's a lot of liberty is kind of the ultimate in accountability, because without government, it's all personal accountability. And many people are kind of treating it as the opposite. They're kind of foregoing they don't want to have accountability. They don't want to confront racism. They don't want to confront sexism. They don't want to confront, big borders, big government, big Russia propagandists. And if you do that, it's not going to stop at one interaction. They will keep going until suddenly everybody thinks that your movement is closed border, even if you remain an open borders person. They will assume that your movement is racist and sexist, even if you are personally not, because it just got let go for too long. I'm not old enough. I'm not thousands of years old, so I couldn't have fixed Christianity when it started getting ill, but I'm doing everything I can to be part of the healing process so people understand it for what it is. And I'm going to do the exact same for the liberty movement. Already I'm correcting libertarians that are within my sphere. The people that are having this ultra strong backlash to the, mainstream libertarians that want to get violent or want to be a return to Sarwark or something terrible like that, right? Like, as opposed to learning their lessons and improving. And I think it's important to be part of that if you're going to be part of a solution, like do what you can on your part, reject the collectivism, treat everybody as an individual, and I think you'll get some great results.
Yeah, and there's something more there too, because I brought up Thaddeus Russell earlier, and you brought up the Tower Gang. Archie in the chat here also says the Tower Gang has all the IQ of a pile of dried and shrivel up dog vomit. And the Tower Gang, the people who were doing that sort of thing, they are very much just directly responsible for a significant amount of this downshift. When I, for instance, was in this group chat full of a lot of libertarians, including Ryan Dawson and a bunch of Tower Gang people and a bunch of people affiliated with this sort of more right-wing version of libertarianism, I got added to this chat, and then it didn't take, I think, it didn't take long at all. I'm not going to say how long it took, because I honestly don't remember, but it was not long at all for me to get kicked out of this chat. And why? Well, because when all these people were talking about, we gotta, go Burr, they fucking had, one of them had, Jose Gallatin had, on his fucking podcast, Thaddeus Russell on to discuss Emma Goldman because Michael Malice came out with his book. So let's just get a grip on this first to begin with. Michael Malice compiles a bunch of essays from people who aren't him and comes out with this book. And people involved in Liberty Spaces, instead of talking to Michael Malice about this book, because, fucking, that would be, he's harder to access, they get other people to talk about the people in his book. People who probably, aren't even that well informed on the subjects to begin with a lot of the time. And in this particular case, Jose Gallison gets on Thaddeus Russell to talk about Emma Goldman. And all I did was, and because of the way Twitter works, if you block somebody, you kick them out of the, whatever group messages you're in. All I did with Jose Gallison was I replied to his tweet about this Emma Goldman Thaddeus Russell interview by linking Thaddeus Russell's article on the Daily Beast written by him himself defending rapist pedo Roman Polanski, who drugged and raped a girl. This should be something where people are like, wow, that's an opportunity to correct this. I should have thought about this a little bit more. I should interrogate him about this. I should follow up. I should do something. What did he do? He blocked me and called me an annoying faggot. So, the Tower Gang, obviously, because they had this guy on their show, they had this guy, and they were going to defend him. They were going to have his six. So, they all joined the dog pile, and progressively, over time, since then, have not only been doubling down on racism, sexism, fucking other forms of bigotry, but also really fucking doubling down on going against me and all of the people in my camp, talking shit both publicly and privately about us. And, that's what you get when you start to point out that maybe the problem isn't some amorphous groomer threat in LGBT circles, but maybe the problem is, you've got problems everywhere, and we need to root them out wherever they are. When you bring up the fact that Thaddeus Russell is an advocate for pedophilia and an advocate for, a twice convicted child predator, including him as a bonus package for paid content. When you bring up that Thaddeus Russell defended rapist Roman Polanski, pedo-rapist Roman Polanski, and had on fucking Eliza Blue on Clint Russell's show, so that he could, fucking, talk to her about when children should be able to have sex with adults. When you realize that the problem goes way deeper than just surface level bullshit, it becomes a lot clearer where the lines actually are. And in this particular case, the Clint Russell situation, Clint Russell sucks the cock of Andrew Tate. He will not stop writing that meat. On Twitter, on any platform, he is definitely on team Andrew Tate. And he has directly said that Andrew Tate is the answer for masculinity. Andrew Tate is a groomer. He met Viv when she was 15, and he groomed her for sex to fly her out to his sex business and be his bottom bitch. That meaning his chief recruiter. She is mentioned as a recruiter for his sex business. He groomed her into it and then used her to help him groom other people. And Clint Russell of Liberty Lockpod, the guy who just helmed the Libertarian Party debate, that giant, alleged debate, which was really more of, a group masturbation session between a bunch of LP members, that guy is working with other people who also support, pedophilia, because he's totally okay endorsing Thaddeus Russell and, saying Thaddeus Russell, is a great man, and having a panel long after this discussion and long after Thaddeus Russell advocates adult child sex. He has Thaddeus Russell as the leader of this panel, fucking called Unregistered Live, where Clint and a bunch of other people are talking about libertarian issues. These are the people at your helm, literally people who advocate this shit, and you're going to point the finger at fucking, LGBT people. You're going to ignore all of the problems in your own ranks and point it elsewhere because it's not about liberty. It's about saying that we support liberty in order to, weaponize these issues against our enemies. That's what it really is. It's not about rooting it out. It's not about dealing with the problem. You'll monetize the problem. You'll help these people. Like, and so when it comes down to it, like, that's just one of many issues, right? Or supporting neoliberal capitalism while it, like, chokes out the developing world, makes the global south into a vassal of the US or a victim of US policy. And then saying that, we support the border because, the razor wire is self-defense and it's all that's standing between us and an invading migrant horde of flowing blah blah, dehumanizing these people and turning them into an amorphous water blob that isn't actually, like, thinking, feeling beings. Supporting unleashing the cops on homeless people rather than addressing the actual socioeconomic conditions that created those homeless people to begin with. Supporting, whatever racism happens to come about. The Tower Gang, affiliated people, David Corbo and Tower Gang Toad, in my replies, boosting each other when David Corbo lied about his family history in order to imply that Jews owned the slave boats, when the reality is that he didn't understand government documents from the place his family was from. And when I actually talked to historians and people from the region, they said, no, in fact, that's fucking government identity documents, and this person was not, in fact, a slave ever. This person was born there and not brought over from somewhere else, and this person was, these are identity documents, has nothing to do with Jews just because it has a little fucking six-pointed star somewhere on it. And, like, he lied, but then when I called him out on the lies, the only thing he did was resort to personal attacks, further lies, further fabrications, and then eventually he and Tower Gang Toad are in the replies telling me, yeah, but we still know who owned the boats. The pirates moved the eye patch onto the head. That's their joke. Their joke is, hey, Jews are bad. I'm not going to say why. I'm not going to elaborate or prove or anything. I'm just going to assume that any position I can take against the Jews is based. That's what these people say. That's how these people think. Any position I can take against the migrants is based. Any position I can take against the LGBT people is based. Anything I can take against anybody who might pose a threat to my right-wing power is, any position I can take against that sort of person is based. And that's the reason that these people are so willing to defend their own and so unwilling to be self-critical, because realizing that there are problems on all sides of this is a fucking problem. If you are Austin Peterson and you have a shirt that says Pinochet was right, and so many fucking libertarians support you and your stupid fucking merch like that, I'm going to call you a groomer, because he literally had, Pinochet had a pedophile colony ran by a pedophile Nazi, Paul Schaefer, Colonia Dignidad, where boys and girls were raped, where women were raped by dogs, where people were tortured in piss vats and crushed with tanks and brutally beaten and fucking thrown out of helicopters. And, oh yeah, let's make jokes about that. Let's say that that's what the commies deserve. No, in fact, the people who probably, the people who say that probably deserve it more than the communists, because they're totally willing to enact state violence on people for their fucking gain.
Absolutely. You're touching on something that's at the heart of, I think, this conversation. Because when you're principled, it's about the truth. When you're not principled, you swallow lies. You're willing to deal with it. And like you mentioned, like, these people will hear a lie and just deal with it. When we talk about, like, anti-Semitism, like with Ryan Dawson, right? They let him around despite him not really being a libertarian person. He seems to have no problem projecting it almost outright all the time, but he always finds himself in these circles, and he'll say something like, we find a video where he changed the thumbnail, but it originally had, like, the gas they used to kill the Jews on it, and you can go in the Wayback Machine and see it, and he just said, no, I didn't do that, no, like, the Fakertarians just made up that story about man never did it. Well, you can just go in and prove it, right? And so, it's done, it's proved. But all the people, like, he went and did his, podcast round with the people. They all asked him, they're like, you didn't do that, right? And he's like, no. And by this point, they all know he did it now, right? Like, it's revealed, he did it, everybody knows. And they're still friends with him. And now I'm not saying you have to kick somebody out of your friendship for one lie, but there needs to be an explanation, right? Like some kind of, this is whole when you establish boundaries to keep your house in order. It's not that nobody ever makes a mess, but it's, hey, clean up the mess and then we can move on, right? And so with everyone knowing that he did the Zyklon B thumbnail, and as well as, like, there were other things in the video that he just says he didn't say, and again, you can look this up, right? Like, it's just there. That's all there is to it. Like, you can see these quotes from him, and everybody knows now that you can see it and see that he lied. And he went on the people's podcasts, assured them, no, I did not do this, lied to their faces. Everybody knows now, and they continue to go with it. You look at something like, and it may seem small, but I'm touching on an important point here. You look at something like with infamous piece now on, like, the Mighty Ducks 2 criticism, where it's like, oh, it's all woke, and there's a whole bunch of girls that play against guys, and I looked at, and he says he looked at the stunts in it. This is what got me in the article. He said, I looked at the stunt people, and they were all white male names. Okay, so I look at the stunts in the credits. Catherine Bolam, Fernando Escobar, Brooke Ballinger White, like Catherine Petra Villalobos. Some of them are both female and non-white. I mean, I am just like, I'm just, and you can see it, right? Mm-hmm. So he definitively lied. Now, if he said, hey, I was looking at the wrong thing, it turns out there was a bunch of, non-white, non-male stunt doubles, that's on me. But that's not the explanation. He just sticks by the lie. Mm-hmm. And the thing is everybody's willing to swallow this lie. Alex Jones is another one. Libertarians, for whatever reason, can see he lied. He accidentally revealed it in court that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he lied. He kind of admitted that he lied. I mean, there's no way to believe Alex Jones and his lies. Now, if he goes and he says, hey, you know what? I messed up. I was operating on information that I got from somebody else. I presented it like a fact. I should never have done that because I didn't do the research on my own. That's on me, guys. My bad. You know what? I would want more, but I would accept that. But what it is no. And then even the instant he gets out of court is like, oh, that was just a whole performance and a charade. Like, yeah, and that oh yeah, the Sandy Creek thing wasn't a psyop on the stand, but as soon as he's out of court, oh yes, of course that was the psyop, right? Like, I'm back to lying about it. And so the tolerance for getting lied to shows the lack of principle that you have. Because if the principle is liberty, then it's grounded in truth. Then you care about the truth. And if somebody is telling a lie, I mean, I've told a lie. I've misquoted Dave Smith before. I left a word out of one of his quotes, and I did say quote unquote, and I shouldn't have. I felt bad. I apologized to him. I tagged it into it. I led with it on the next show, and I meant it. I still feel bad about it to this day, even though it's years old. But I feel bad about the misquote, And the thing is like, that's the type of accountability we should have. I'm not expecting perfection. Some people will make a mistake, but. And I didn't leave the word out on purpose. I just botched the quote, by the way. I don't want anybody thinking like I lied on purpose. I lied on accident and then corrected it afterwards. But like, yeah, you're not going to get everything perfect. But people shouldn't have a tolerance for me lying to them. My audience does not have a tolerance for me lying to them. Other people's audiences do. Lou Rockwell's audience does. Alex Jones' audience does. Ryan Dawson's audience does. They tolerate these lies. And then they bring these, like you said, Jeremy, when these people lie, sometimes they bring them in. Like Ryan Dawson, do the circles. You just said this. You've been saying crazy anti-Semitic stuff. It's getting unearthed now. Come on every one of our podcasts and talk about it, please. What does that say? when you take a known liar and then when everything blows up, say, hey, please come on our please come on our podcast and do the show. Right? Like, you are embracing these lies at this point. And you look at with war, I talked about it. All these people who revealed to me, who told me as a young liberty lover a decade ago about the crimes against the Uyghurs in China, about Russian aggression, about Putin's history, about all the propaganda in Russia, then all of a sudden swallow up these lies. And they're like, no, Putin didn't tell a single lie in that interview. No, Putin was provoked. Putin didn't have a... Please stop embarrassing yourself. You're swallowing a bunch of lies. And if you find yourself to be one of the people swallowing the lies and dealing with it, you're not basing it on principle. You're basing it on bias. And it's no wonder that trends towards right-wing stuff, because that's kind of just being a reactionary. Your bias is whatever initially strikes you. And I don't want to speak for everybody, Jeremy. Maybe there's a conversation had about this, but like, when I first heard about the concept of being trans, it did catch me off guard. No way, what? And then I get science. I look at data. I talk to people. I have interviews with people, study their lives. And I go, okay, my gut reaction was wrong. You know, it turns out there are trans people in this world, right? There's a biological case for it. Of course, that makes sense now. If there's intersex people, of course there's going to be trans people sometime. And so, like, it all makes sense to me now. I understand the gut reaction. What I don't understand is putting your gut reaction above the facts, above the truth. You're literally, I mean, it's funny that the Daily Wire is doing this because they're all about facts over feelings, but they're all up in their feelings now. You listen to their takedown of Dylan Mulvaney, really count out the facts versus times they make an opinion. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's not even close. They list maybe 3 facts mixed with like 100 opinions.
Right.
Of just being like, this person's a monster and ugly and all this stuff, you know, just name calling. And this is what's happened with the liberty movement. They've embraced this reactionary, it's okay, whatever confirms my bias, even if I know it's a lie, is good. And that is not good for liberty, because liberty loves truth and politicians and statists love lies. And you play right when you say it's okay to lie people to try and get my objective across.
Yeah, and I posted this last year, May 6, 2023, because it really, like, I think this sort of encapsulates that notion. I said, liberty without truth is impossible. Truth without liberty is useless. So if you have liberty without truth, you have, like, everybody creating and fabricating a reality, and therefore it doesn't matter what your principles are. If those principles can be violated because somebody fabricated the reality that doesn't in fact exist, then that's not, you know, it doesn't matter how much alleged liberty you have. You don't have that liberty if people are going to accept whatever people say about you, and there's no justice, and there's no proof, there's no standard of evidence, there's no, like, sense of reason. You can't have reasoned discourse because people are just spreading lies. If you don't have a foundation of truth, it doesn't matter how much alleged liberty you have, you're not going to be able to operate positively within that framework in a libertarian context. And truth without liberty is useless. If you can't say the truth, if you can't behave as though what is true, if you can't do any of these sorts of things because you don't have the liberty to do them, then it doesn't matter that you have truth, because it's sort of like that thing that Elon Musk lied about, and all these libertarians love sucking him off despite him being, like, massively statist. He gets a huge amount of money from the state. He does the state's bidding. He's a fucking surveillance industrialist, military industrialist, war pig who's on the side of, you know, whichever power happens to, you know, back his fucking projects. And he's also directly affiliated with, you know, Peter Thiel at the steering committee of the Bilderberg Group. Like, everybody is like, oh, Alex Jones, he's talking about them globalists. But if he's going to truly go against the globalists, maybe he should also go against a friend of Peter Thiel who thought, you know, maybe he could copy WeChat. Maybe WeChat in China, Chinese communists, isn't the kind of thing that America should be emulating, but we are because Elon Musk wants to copy it. Side note, but like, he said, freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. He said, I'm going to limit your reach, and that is still not somehow a violation of your free speech. Yes, the fuck it is. It is a violation of free speech to limit reach. If you lock me in a box and I cannot be heard, then you are not an advocate of free speech. Free speech includes the ability for people to hear what I say. And if they can't, because of you, you are blocking my speech. It doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter if you delete the post. It matters that you are blocking my speech from the ears of those who could hear it. And that means directly you are contradicting your free speech principles. But so many of these people want to ignore that. Like, if you can't spread your truth, you know, then liberty is not there. If you cannot speak freely, if you cannot, like, act freely, if you cannot be free, it doesn't matter how true what you say is, you will still be ruled. You will still have these constraints upon you. And liberty without truth doesn't exist, because you can't have liberty if people are just going to spread whatever and justice doesn't matter. And there's no standard of evidence. There's no habeas corpus. There's no security in persons, papers, and effects. There's no fucking... It should be obvious. But so many of these people are willing to capitulate because they get their anti-left jollies. They get to jack off about Pinochet throwing their enemies out of helicopters. And it doesn't matter to them that he also helped fuck boys. That doesn't matter, you know? What matters is that they had their fucking
go out
jollies.
the window when you own the left.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I encourage, and I think one of the tough things about Elon Musk, especially with like Twitter, is he pretends to be the free speech absolutist. I believe he said he's that before, right? Like an absolutist. And believe me, we've got pouring out the yang on Twitter now. Like, he's adhered to it to some degree, but then will suppress other posts. I mean, in fact, wasn't there that compliance thing in Libertarian? Elon Musk has even been like more compliant with like Democrat and Republican requests.
83% of authoritarian government requests. And also, he's also been like directly at the behest of certain individuals. Eliza Blue is an example of that. There was this fucking screenshot floating around from a video she consented to participate in from World Star Hip Hop. And this bitch consented to having that out there. And then when people pointed that out as a hole in her story of being trafficked, and said, you know, actually, this is not consistent. This is real journalism people were doing, because she was being propped up by Elon Musk as an anti-groomer so that he could use her as a component of his also anti-social justice bullshit. He was directly censoring people who posted a screenshot from a YouTube video. And this is a free speech, motherfucker? Fuck you.
Right. Like, it's not like it's a bad label. Because I think if he said, like, hey, I'm going to run this the way I see fit, I'm going to utilize my freedom of association, and I'll distance from some people and embrace others. All right. But that's different than what you said you were going to do. You know, I mean, and really, because you bought it, and you bought it publicly with, you know, as a publicly, you know, shareholders own this thing, saying like, yeah, I'm a free speech absolutist. I mean, you said you were going to run this as like a free speech, you know, absolutist situation. And now you've become, like you said, 83% apparently of authoritarian government requests. He's just like, sure, I'll let me take that post down. Let me bury this. And of course, when his own posts get community notes, which I love, he's like, something wrong with community notes. Better fix this. Community notes is like the most valuable thing Twitter has to offer right now. But like, he is just so like not embracing what he said he was going to do. And like I said, this is one of those things that comes down to, well, he's got his freedom of association. Okay, but maybe stop being like a policy wonk for a second and just ask yourself, is that good or is that bad? Like, is what he's doing a good thing or bad thing? I think we all agree he has the freedom of association and he can amp people up, kick people off. He paid for the platform, he can do what he wants. But should he? Is it the right thing to do? Libertarians, this used to be your bag. Say, wow, that was the wrong thing to do. That was really messed up. You don't have to just be messed up because on the grounds of this, this, and this. Listen, I don't need to give you a policy or philosophy reason why kicking like pedos off a platform is okay. It's okay. It just is. I could get into like I of it and like start linking a bunch of books and quoting a bunch of chapters and like Psychology Today journal entries, but it's probably okay to just be like, all right, this sucks, right? So we're not going to do this. We're not going to have these people distributing like child pornography on Twitter, right? Like, that's not cool. Yeah, let's kick them off of there. Okay, that's okay. But like I said, when he starts to suppress you and your reach, you know, I mean, this is the thing that frustrated us about Facebook, right?
Yeah.
We libertarians were getting discriminated badly against on Facebook. Now we're getting it again on Twitter. And like, shouldn't we be equally angry? Why is it that like Elon Musk is living in this standard that Mark Zuckerberg, we didn't force him to live up to? You know, like, we're upset appropriately at Mark Zuckerberg, but we're not at Elon Musk because Elon Musk sometimes owns the libs despite being a total like big government shill that does what the authoritarian libs say.
Yeah.
Like, it's just...
And like, real quick on that note, if people want to say, oh, it's his platform, like, no, he didn't. So he didn't buy this privately. People want to forget, memory hole this, but like, the primary shareholder for Twitter before he bought it was forget his name right now, but he was fucking one of the members of the sovereign wealth fund of, like, I think Saudi Arabia, if I remember correctly. He was part of the House of Saud. And then afterward, after he bought it, not only did Saudi Arabia's fucking sovereign wealth fund still put money into it, but they, like, the Qatar sovereign wealth fund also gave him $375 million. And Peter Thiel of the Bilderberg Group also helped him fund this. And like, Peter Thiel is a massive military intelligence and whatever industrialist. And he also happens to fund a bunch of right-wing motherfuckers. Like, his money is infested in all of the student groups and all of the think tanks and all of the political action committees and all of the shit. He's got his hands in those pockets, in those pies, because he is big money, big business, big government, big banks, big corporations. That is Peter Thiel. He gave Elon Musk a significant amount of money that he got partly because of the government. So did multiple other government-affiliated motherfuckers. And these people want to pretend that Elon Musk just had $44 billion lying around and he bought it on his own. They want to pretend that, forget the history, forget that he is supported by the governments, pretend that he's like some man on the inside, he's helping us. No, he's not, you fucking sellout cuck. Shut the fuck up. If you are one of those people, shut your fuckhole right the fuck now. You are not helping.
You're making excuses for the people treading on you. You're doing the tread harder daddy meme without like you're doing it unironically though, but everybody else sees it. Like, it's just,
and
it ensures that
real quick, he also just apologies, but he also banned a bunch of pro-Palestine activists recently. I just had to say that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like and you can't pretend to have like the high ground when like dictators that are responsible for genocides have like a platform on your Twitter, but like you're kicking some YouTuber off for talking about like some of the war crimes that like Israel has committed. Like, you're obviously being wildly inconsistent, right? Like this is, and I think we just need to be like, and I'm aware like Elon Musk has a whole team behind him and everything. Like it's not just like him personally, but this is kind of part of, and to bring it back to the conversation we've been having, this is what these personalities will do. To bring it back is create this culture and then let things slide down from there. And we've got to this culture now where it's like, yeah, we're just going to kick people that, oh, community notes is suddenly going after us. Well, we need to find a way to delete community notes or get rid when they aren't convenient for us then, and it's a very authoritarian style way of running a business. And that's not good, like even if you capitalists want to like stick up for it, again, you shouldn't. But if for whatever reason you want to say it's legal, that's fine. But at least acknowledge that it's bad. Like that's the very minimum you can do is just be like, this is bad. The sellout from the libertarians has just kind of it has hurt the entire brand. It makes it difficult to use the word libertarian without having to describe yourself. I talk about this like a dating profile, right? Like if I say I am a Christian on a dating profile, people are going to have a view of me that's not entirely accurate. But if I say I'm a Christian, but not one of those Christians, people are going to get an accurate idea of who I am, right? Mm-hmm. And it's sad because what this means is that Christian now carries with it the natural connotation. When people think of Christians, the number one thing, when they ask anybody, including Christians, by the way, the number one thing they think about when they think of Christians, number one is judgmental, right? Like, despite it being explicitly listed as something that gets you, like, can prevent you from being saved. When Christ says this isn't even like some obscure passage. This is something all the gospel writers caught him saying, right? If you judge people, your salvation is in danger, right? That's the number one thing Christians are now associated with, is being judgmental. Number two is going to church on Sunday. And it's like not till number three that it's like they like something positive, that like they like to sing hymns and stuff. So you have like a natural that's really negative. And so what it does is it affects our language and the way we talk about it. I am philosophically a libertarian. I'm philosophically an anarchist, and I'm probably philosophically a capitalist. I am aware, because the capitalists didn't always agree with each other, there's a little variation there. But, that tends to describe my philosophy on economics more than anything else. However, all of those things, if most people, not just people in the movement, because when we use language, I'm communicating something you might not know already. That's the point of communication, right? If I'm just talking about what you already know, why are we talking at all, right? So if I'm, and as I talk to listeners, maybe but maybe they don't, that they say, oh, anarchy. Boy, I thought that's when you light a Molotov cocktail and set somebody's building on fire. Okay, that's the first impression most people have when they hear anarchy. And it's up to me to either fix that image or leave the label behind. And we need to kind of make a decision on what that is. Even the word Christian itself was actually, I believe, like the term comes from like little Christ man, which is something that like the Romans used the term, and these Christians embraced the title, but it was a term of mockery, right? Like being called a Yankee, right? It's like, sure, I'll embrace the title. All right, I'm a Yankee, right? Like that it was a term of mockery that you end up embracing. And some people are doing that by being like, yeah, you call me we've seen in feminist movements that like slut is a term of empowerment now, among some of them, obviously. And this is the whole thing of communication. It can be very difficult when we talk about language. But now the term libertarian, like I said, if it's associated with Donald Trump, why, if I use it, I am literally putting a hurdle in between. So I have to say libertarian, but not one of those libertarians. Just the same way I have to say I'm Christian, but not one of those Christians. If I say I'm libertarian, my dating profile, and leave it at that, 90% of people are just going to think I'm a right-wing loon, right? Like I'm and that sucks. There's some people, I enjoy listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. I have no problem admitting that. But I am aware that if I say I love Joe Rogan, that implies a culture to most people that most other people don't want to be a part of. So I have to say, I listen to Joe Rogan, but I'm definitely not acting like one of his typical followers acts, right? Like, I'm definitely not, when I say I'm a libertarian, hey, that's very different than the Libertarian Party.
Right.
And that's really something that the Libertarian Party needs to think about right now, is people like me that have called themselves libertarians for a while, that haven't changed ideologically, that now have to say, is it worth saying libertarian and correcting people? Could I just say, like, I'm a voluntarist, or, you know, something that doesn't yet connotation associated with it? It's hard to say the answer, because, like I said, with feminist movement, they have successfully reclaimed some words. Sometimes there's some words that are so bad there's no reclaiming them, you know. I can't say what the right answer is. All I can say is I know the purpose of communication is to give you the right idea of who I am. And if I say I'm a libertarian, that no longer gives you the idea that I love freedom. It gives you the idea that I really love Putin, that I really love Donald Trump, that I really love the cops, that I really hate the homeless, that I really want to shut down the border. And I mean, sadly, it no longer even means we're like economic policy wonks anymore, because people don't even think about that with us. We haven't been talking about it, so why would they? Which would be the one great thing about being with the libertarian label, is that I know too much about economics. That would be fantastic. And so now I have to be like, oh, I really love economy. And that's a separate conversation from saying I'm a libertarian now. That's too bad.
Yeah, well, and it's not just that. It's also like these people, they're so desperate for numbers using this losing strategy that they are now actively endorsing people that are, like, for instance, okay, so you want to talk Trump. Let's talk about how they actively endorse Milei, who is a Trump acolyte. He is a Trump supporter. He is that. He went to, like, CPAC and fucking glad-handed Trump nearly tearfully. He was, like, practically jacking off behind stage with Trump. And Vivek Ramaswamy, he also met with that guy, who's also a guy who jacks off about Trump. And all of these people are part of this sort of Trump conservative movement. And this Trump conservative movement is overwhelmingly comprised of, like, you know, fascists who, like, couch their fascism in one way or the other. But libertarians are cozying up to that. Adrian Malagon, go fuck yourself. Like, his whole California LP convention shit, where he was like, I'm going to give free speaking to non-libertarians, to the point where I will even have a gun control checkpoint at the fucking border to the fucking conference. And, like, having all of these people on board with like, libertarian conventions where libertarians are kicked out and told that their campaign material is garbage, who didn't pay because they didn't pay. Meanwhile, the non-libertarians didn't have to pay to begin with, and, like, that's the environment, because he wanted Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to speak there, and he didn't care that, like, he was creating an anti-libertarian environment. He didn't care that Robert Kennedy Jr. is a gun grabber, a greenwasher, a fucking guy who ran apologetics for the for the lockdowns because they were good for the environment to start with. Like, a guy who overwhelmingly is just a bigoted piece of shit who doesn't actually care about, like, you know, fucking liberty or libertarianism or anything like that. He was there because he wanted to pad his campaign. And then what happens? Angela McArdle is on fucking News Nation or whatever it was, saying that they might that he's considering a Libertarian Party run, or that people might have him as a Libertarian Party run. Dave Smith had him on his show, like, right before grilling him on fucking Israel, saying maybe I should be your vice president. Fucking. And this is the same Dave Smith that echoes Vivek Ramaswamy on his positions on the border, saying we should bring the troops home but put them on the border. The Constitution-free zone isn't Constitution-free enough. We need more martial law within that 100-mile strip of the border. We need that. surrounding the country. Just if you're in the LA, New York, Chicago, whatever regions, you're going to be policed by military troops. Fucking, that's not a better world. A better world is not a world where this is more like a giant military base than it already is. A better world is a world where the military industrial complex is divested, not refocused so that people can wage a xenophobic and jingoistic war on drugs and cartels and shit on Mexico, which is what Vivek Ramaswamy wanted. But that didn't stop people in the libertarian movement from supporting that shit. Ryan Kurt of the Josh Smith campaign actively floating the idea of having him as the presidential nominee. And when I brought up that, hey, first off, maybe hire me to make you a website before you start courting presidential candidates, because your entire web presence is garbage and most people can't even find Polk County Libertarians on a map. Fucking... But also, secondarily, don't endorse non-libertarians, especially fascists, on the anti-woke grift, which is a whole thing, like the anti-woke grift. Don't endorse those people over libertarians, because there are perfectly fine libertarians like Hornberger who need actual, good attention. We've got people who are chomping at the bit to get the kind of exposure that these people are willing to give to establishment Republicans. Even establishment Republicans like Vivek Ramaswamy, who fucking, literally wanted a COVID database, a vaccine database. He wanted that, and he was also, paying wiki editors to silence themselves because they said that he was partly funded by a Soros-linked scholarship. He was! That's true! Why should anybody shut the fuck up about that? These people are not serious about free speech. Trump is a vicious anti-fucking, liberty motherfucker, and anybody who likes him is exposing themselves. I went on this rant the other day because I think people need to be reminded about how Trump actually is. I said, globalists love Trump. He can package being the swamp as draining it, lie his way into a cult following of baseless and unfounded conspiracy hypotheses, lead a cult toward chaos they exploit for their order. He serves the same functional purpose as Javier Milei, which is why they love each other. He's on the side of the WEF, on record saying Klaus Schwab is doing a great job, but he went against the elites. He's an outsider. Warp speed didn't help them. Banning bump stocks, ending the drone reporting mandate, consolidating the Fed's power with the mint, funding the Pentagon to wage war on COVID, seizing land and starting the border fence, taking out a foreign general inconvenient to the West, finishing off the little girl in the al-Awlaki family, being friends with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeff Epstein, and by the way, complimenting him on his taste in young women and saying he's fun to be around, creating a honeypot on January 6th to create lists and further regulate social media, jacking up border spending, breaking up families and caging kids, softballing Charlottesville, calling Joe Biden supporters anarchists and agitators, and demonizing protesters, Project 2025, his plan to prevent legal entry of every communist into the U.S., his Muslim ban, his lockdowns, and martial law in early COVID, having Johnson & Johnson on his campaign trail. I could go on. He did nothing but help the neoliberal globalists. He's just an edgier aesthetic. That's it. So that's these people. They want the edgier aesthetic. They don't care if it comes from a fucking globalist status like Trump or Vivek or Milei or any of these fucks. They will support the CIA if it's coming through Bin Laden because it's edgy. They will support the CIA if it's coming through Nazis because, we gotta fight the wokes, and the wokes, love the Jews. So they'll support whatever the fuck they want. There's no principle, there's no mooring, there's no foundation, there's no reason, truth, empathy, or liberty. It doesn't fucking matter anymore.
Well said on all parts, and I don't really have a lot to add because, it is as you said, you can see the LARPing happening in their practice because they are no longer, I think, when we were ready for radicalism, I was so ready to be even to put Gary Johnson and mainstream candidates behind. We talked about being radical, just being like Donald Trump, haha, what a joke. Joe Biden, haha, what a joke. We're just this completely different entity, and we're thinking so far beyond. And instead, like you said, we've got all these ties, we've got all these simping for him. And if you're even on the border of supporting Donald Trump, like, I mean, a lot of the libertarians are like, if I don't get a good one, I might have to support Donald Trump. You should be like, you're just flirting with that line, man. Like, that's a line you should be so far away from right now. That should be so absurd in your mind. Now, I'm fine with some libertarians being imperfect, especially if you're new to the movement. But this is the leadership we're talking about that are doing these kind of things, and making excuses for all the people that you said, with all these connections that we know, with all the, if there is a global agenda, that you're defending people who are part of it. Right? Like mega billionaires, corporate handout, crony wannabes that have all been a part of it. And and now all of a sudden you're sticking up for them because you think in this Keynesian system, maybe that's a good thing or something. Like, libertarians used to be the type of people that would just say, I want to heal this world, that I am so sick of seeing people who could be healed die because of how we've set up our economic system, and especially the Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, whatever system, all the government involvement, all the regulations involved with it. And now we're just like, oh, if you didn't have the money to pay this really expensive overpriced system, you should die. Right? This is like, that's a common libertarian thing to hear said, is that, oh yeah, well, if you didn't get the insurance and now you can't afford a bajillion-dollar heart surgery, well, that's the risk, right? Well, we're in this manipulative system where heart surgery shouldn't cost what they cost. That used to be the standard libertarian talking point, is they shouldn't cost that much. We're going to attack that and bring it down to what the market value should be, and reject all these other government ideas. And instead, it's just like, oh no, go die. You didn't afford. You lived a life that wasn't worthy of saving. And yeah, there's all these inaccuracies in the system, but I don't care about those. You just go die. And instead of saying, oh, well, we need to fix up all this welfare system, instead it's just like, nah, let's keep the welfare system. F the immigrants who might use it. Like, we are attacking individuals as opposed to defending individuals. Does that sound like the philosophy of individualism to anybody? I mean, the only people you treat as individuals are these gods and idols, like you were talking about, Jeremy. These people that, like, should not be the leaders of your movement. These people who have lied to you before. And instead of saying, I lied, or, hey, I made a mistake, I didn't mean to say that. A good example I have is with Michael Heiss, who just one day, like, out of the blue, was like, Spangle told me he hates the LPMCs. So, the Weird Libertarians guys aren't gonna like us. And Chris heard it and was like, let me show you my phone. Here's my last communication with you. Here's this. Now, it'd be one thing if Michael Heiss came back and was like, I am so sorry. I thought I was somebody else. There was some kind of explanation, right? Like, I thought it was you, but I got you confused in my head. It was somebody else who rejected me. My bad. Like, clean air. Okay. But instead it's just, nah, I like the lie. F you. Like, let's start this fight. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, how at that point did people who were still with the LPMC go, yeah, I'm okay with that lie, and then continue thinking that something good was going to come of it? Because, like we all said, even if you deal with a couple of lies, politics being downstream from culture, that those lies are going to become politics. You have a culture of accepting lies, you're going to have politics that accepts lies. And sure enough, this is proven to be prescient. Like, it was very, very prophetic at the time, because now we can see that they swallow lies for breakfast. They just eat them every day and just be like, yeah, there was somebody, you were talking about RFK, conversation I had the other day. I was like, yeah, I don't really like all the lies he's told. And they're like, name one time he's told a lie. And I'm just like, here's 20. Like, I mean, what do you want? And I remember the guy even came back to me, and credit to him, was just like, I haven't seen all these quotes before. I've only heard him speak in person, and I'm pretty inspired when he speaks in person. I'm like, all right, but like, you were so confident that he doesn't tell a lie. And the other problem I have is, now that you found out he's told like at least 20 lies that were just a simple Google search for me. Like, I didn't do anything all that interesting to find all his lies, that he still supports him. Right? Like, back when I was a right like I mentioned earlier, I used to be with the GOP and strategizing in Colorado and everything and organizing. And I remember sharing an InfoWars article. I did not know Alex Jones at the time. I didn't know he owned InfoWars and everything like that. And I shared a story about, and this story has gotten some traction before. Everybody retreads it. It may actually happen one day, but about like climate activists blocking a road and somebody dies on the ambulance. Now, like I said, this could actually happen because climate activists still do this, so it's only a matter of time. But I found out that the story was completely fake. Like they looked at death records for the county that it said it was in, couldn't find anything. Like investigative journalists, and you were talking about this too, Jeremy, that like we should encourage these investigative journalists when they try to uncover the truth of something, as opposed to just being like, that's our side, you can't tell the truth about our side, don't you dare. Like, don't go uncovering the truth. Like, don't you want to know if people are lying to you? But anyway, I remember sharing it, somebody telling me it was fake, me being incredibly embarrassed. And from that moment, I was like, I'm never going to share InfoWars again. I'm never going to share Alex Jones again. Like, I'm going to blacklist this. And I was still a GOP person, even after that happened. But I was like, hey, I'm not going to get lied to like that. That makes me look stupid. But now we're at this point where libertarians are saying, yeah, lie to me. That's okay. I'm good to get lied to because I think it'll help the outcome somehow. This like ends justify the means kind of thing. And it's embarrassing. When Eliza Blue has her whole story blown up and you find out that it's just all fake, write her off. Don't continue to defend her. Don't continue to sit there and just be like, well, her message still, even if you believe in the message, use somebody else as an example. This is the problem I've always had with the libertarians that use like Hoppe or Lou Rockwell to make a point. Somebody else has made the point that's better. Scott Ritter is a perfect example of this. Scott Ritter does not say anything that other people are not saying. The only difference is that they haven't tried to have sexual encounters with children.
Twice.
So why not use the people not having sexual encounters with children to make your point, as opposed to Scott Ritter?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So, okay, you want to talk lies. Here's two major lies from the RFK campaign that's, like, it fucking infuriated me. So the first lie that I could bring up is that he, like, directly said that, like, fucking the COVID virus was somehow, like, manufactured to avoid Ashkenazi Jews. And I think he also said Chinese people, but he said that and then had to retract it because that's utter fucking bullshit. And, like, he had no backing for that. He had nothing. And he also said that the reason people are trans now is because, specifically kids are trans now, is the reason we're seeing such an upturn in the youth being trans is because of chemicals in the water. And he specifically said, if you put atrazine in with frogs, and he said this on Jordan Peterson's show, and Jordan Peterson is another lying hack who lied, for instance, about a fucking UK-based fucking cock-milking porn video and said that this was a Chinese Communist Party torture facility. And he also got offended at a paper towel dispenser telling him to be better with, like, waste and put paper in the paper bin instead of just, like, putting everything in one. He said that that's totalitarian tyranny. And so he said all this shit, right? And he also happened to do all this while boosting a wide variety of anti-trans nonsense. And so he has RFK on his show, and RFK struggles his speech out to say that, like, generally speaking, the trans thing can be boiled down to chemicals in the water. And he said atrazine, if you put that into a water source with frogs, it will feminize them instantly. First off, no, it won't. Second off, it's not all frogs that this was observed in. It's a very specific breed of frog, species of frog that's like it has propensities to sex switching on like a biological level. It's that fucking specific and particular species of frog. It's not any other. So it's not like you can just take any frog and mix atrazine and suddenly you have a trans. That's not how this fucking works. And then tertiarily, the reason that they found that out was because it was part of agricultural runoff that they observed. And the atrazine was part of, like, if I recall correctly, like a pesticide shit. And so, like, they were, like, observing this in high runoff areas. They weren't just saying that this is, like, something anywhere that's near atrazine. That's not how this fucking works. And when I brought this up, when I said he's lying, when I said that there's no evidence that trans people are a result of atrazine or any of these other chemicals, I literally had RFK Jr. cocksuckers in my mention, transphobic little pieces of shit, telling me that I was bought by atrazine. No! Fuck atrazine! Fuck all of this shit! If there is what... I hate AI. And by the way, the Libertarian Party has an official position on AI of saying that it's a neutral tool that we should use. Go fuck yourself, LP. There is no reason to have a position on AI as a political party. That should be something that people can be independent in your party on. But you're saying that in order to be a libertarian, you have to have a positive view of AI? Go fuck yourself. But, like, if anything AI could be useful for, it's this software that they're building, the software and hardware that where you can go through a field of crops and zap weeds with lasers. That's excellent. That is one of the only uses of AI that I will support. And I am an anti-AI extremist. Because then you don't have to have any of these harmful pesticides. You can just kill weeds and you can move forward. You don't have to have all these nutrient destroyers. You don't have to let the fucking crops off gas so that they can go, you know, fucking like McDonald's has their giant potato off-gassing factories before the potatoes get to consumer because they're full of a bunch of toxic chemicals. You don't have to have that because you can zap it with lasers. Cool. AI. Whatever. That's fine. That's a fine use of AI. One of the few I will support. But, like, ultimately, I'm enough against these pesticides, these chemicals, these things that have been fucking us up, that I will support an AI project that goes against it. And everybody who knows me knows that I hate AI. I'm viciously anti-AI. So I'm not atrazine bot. Fuck atrazine. But it's not doing that. It's not making kids trans. It's not happening. And if it was, then they would need to, like, somehow highlight how this was only happening to kids in that fucking school or that region or whatever, and not the adults. They would need to explain how that only got into the kids' water supply and why the adults in the region aren't having a similar level of feminization. It's not real. It's not true. The science does not back this up, and basic scrutiny says it's fucking bullshit, but they will still support it because their fucking guy says it's true and because they don't like LGBT people. It's the same shit that the fucking Nazis did. They purged the gays, they purged the trans, they purged the minorities, and they had to do that in order to isolate their right-wing power. And that's what these people want. They want right-wing power. They don't give a fuck about the truth.
It's like you said, they basic scrutiny is the point you're talking about, because, like, I think the thing is if you do basic scrutiny, it doesn't even, and I'm not even talking basic scrutiny like doing a Google search. Sometimes the fact check is attached to the actual piece of, like, just read it, right? All you were reading anyway. All I'm asking is that you read the lie. Are you willing to read the truth? Now, I of all people understand how fact checkers lie. Believe me, I'm not saying to just take them without scrutiny either. But if you're going to do scrutiny, shouldn't you also do the same scrutiny for the people who talk about these issues, like the trans issues? If they keep getting fact checked, okay, maybe do some scrutiny on the fact checking itself, but understand that it got fact checked and understand that there's some nuance there, or at least some investigation to be done. And like I said, Jeremy, these people have a tolerance for getting lied to because their principles are gone. Like, because it's just, and maybe you're more bold about this. You're probably right, because I do feel that at this point it's intentional. The libertarian movement, what has happened, I do believe it is intentional, because I guess this is a separate issue. So let me put a pause on that. I'll finish this sentence or this idea, but that. They're not willing to do basic scrutiny. And when basic scrutiny pops up, they reject it because it clashes, like, with what they think, what they feel. And that's what makes you reactionary. And there's a reason right wings have been reactionaries for hundreds of years, and the two terms have been close to synonymous, because they're just appealing to what makes you feel comfortable, what you already think you know, what you already think you feel.
Yeah.
And if you're constantly just going with that gut reaction, yeah, you're going to remain right-winged, because you're always going to be grounded in this kind of tradition. I was raised this way. I will continue to raise people this way. And it's okay to have, I think, and this is probably something the left wing has done. Well, I won't say probably. This is something the left wing has done that I can't stand. But they've made positive change feel like, you weren't doing this all along, you idiot, you a-hole, and it's like, well, let's welcome better. Corporal punishment isn't great for parenting. Okay, let's encourage a change, as opposed to just be like, you abusive jerks, all you've done is abuse and continue to abuse. Most people think they're punishing their children to help them. And so when you paint them as these evildoers, which they know they are not, they just care that their kids have discipline, then you've kind of closed off that avenue to change to them. And so I understand why there is a reflexive, I dislike the left, because the left doesn't do a good job communicating that they like you. And if I'm talking about especially the authoritarian left, they oftentimes don't. Let's be honest, they will quickly use an entire group of people and then sell out those people and then tell you that the selling own good. So I am very much a centrist. The reason this is tended on right wing is because that's just where the Libertarian Party is right now. Like, that's the reason this conversation is where it's at. I haven't really moved much one way or another. An anarcho-capitalist. I still read young Rothbard. I still listen to David and Milton Friedman. I love all the classics. Even Sowell. Like, I get into it. I learned to not idolize those people, though, so that when something like late Rothbard happens, I don't say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I love Rothbard so much that I'm willing to take all of the other Rothbard and throw them in a garbage can. Take this. So anyway, again, I'm getting sidetracked. But that's why this is kind of dunked on the right a little bit more than the left, is because, and they'll even tell you, like I said, the communications guy for the Libertarian Party, Clint, he said, I'm going to go harder on the Democrats than Republicans. I see one is worse than the other. That's where they're at. So they are right of center. So naturally, my criticisms are going to be of where they're at right now. They find social regimentation to be acceptable and don't really speak up a lot on free market economics anymore because they're too busy siding with the right wing on culture stuff. So because that's going on, that's just kind of where it's at. I wanted to finish this point, and now I'm having trouble remembering what it was.
The intentionality of these actions?
Oh, the intentionality of it, right. So they did such an organized job and stuck with it for many years. There was many years the Mises Caucus and the right-wing libertarians and the paleos failed to take the party back, and they stayed organized. They stayed motivated. They got people on buses and showed up to all these places. What they did, the organizational part of it should be admired. If you're going to take over a political party, please look at what they did. Fighting on so many fronts and organizing everything to do what they did took a lot of work. And I don't like it. I was one of the first people that needed to get out of the way. I could tell with the direct harassment that they needed me out of the way. I left even before convention, and I haven't returned, and I'm doing much better things outside of politics now anyhow. So it's all for the best. But you look at what they did, and you just say they are so organized and so meticulous, and they have the numbers, and they can get it done when they need it done. So when we start looking at states that will no longer have ballot access for the upcoming elections because they dropped the ball, that's very intentional, because this is not a party that this is not a group of people that drops the ball. They knew exactly what they had to do to take over this party. They knew exactly what they had to do to maintain ballot access. They did one, they did not do the other. And so now when you look at it, you got to say, boy, why were they so good at this and so bad at the other? Now, it's easy to put this dichotomy in your brain and just saying, well, they're a little different. but they're really not. A lot of times it's just showing up or making sure that you have a person run in a certain district. You can put any name up there. You have a name, put it up there. Just do what you can to get that ballot access. That's your job as a political party. And their failure to do so and to get, donors when they were so well funded before. What happened, And so to me, it's just a guess. I don't have a smoking gun, but where there's smoke, there's fire. And to me, it seems intentional. And I truly believe it is, because I don't see there any way that they were so incredibly competent and organized at taking over a party, and then so incredibly incompetent and disorganized when it comes to maintaining ballot access or running that party. So I happen to believe that this is an intentional, maybe this puts me in the conspiracy theory camp. I can't tell you who is doing it specifically. I think maybe the most famous names that I would suspect of it, even they might not be doing intentional so much as the person who gave them the money is being intentional, right? Like their big donors are doing it intentionally. I don't know. And I don't want to go about, I say this just to say that you say, Hodey, well, why would you say this if you don't have a smoking gun and evidence and receipts and everything like that? Well, because if you were to do this on purpose, it would look no different than what's going on now. That's how bad it is. Now, if it's incompetence, and that's what it ends up being, it's incompetence so bad that it looks intentional. Because to be honest, I think you move right, you harness the right-wing populism, then you disintegrate your own party, and you make your party irrelevant so that your right-wingers just vote for the mainstream right-wing. This process is somewhat known. I think people that believe it's intentional, we've got this detailed out. But as far as why, it makes me sad because we shouldn't conflate this complete disaster of a libertarian party right now. And I believe there's probably recovery for it. The Libertarian Party has actually seen worse days, believe it or not, a couple of times. We've been in worse, more disastrous scenarios than we are today. So I think it'll recover. It'll get taken back over. But the reason it's in such a bad space today is because we just haven't been committed we haven't maintained that same commitment for taking over the party as we have with making the party functional. And I will say, even though I was against the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus before the takeover, especially after I got the boot myself from mostly their adherents. I'm sure they didn't say it officially, but like I said, you espouse a culture that is anti-Hodey and anti-Jeremy, you're going to make sure, you're going to get called out more than some other people. So, I left, and I think that it appears that they were so systematic at getting rid of me and then so unsystematic about actually running the thing. To me, I feel like it's intentional. Just a guess.
Well, and
I'd be interested in your thoughts, but yeah.
See, it's not even a guess because, for instance, I have access to chat logs that were exported from Discord servers of Libertarian Party shit, where party leadership is actively undermining other candidates. Libertarian Party candidates being actively undermined. And that's not it. That's not the only thing. You can go in the official Google groups that are public and watch this happen. You can go in comment sections. You can see it in real time in people's discourse. You can see people like Michael Rechtenwald coming out and saying that he's the only anti-state candidate. He said that and then deleted the tweet after that gave obviously bad optics, because that's fucking bullshit. But these people are in this high school mentality of, I'm going to tear down Becky because she's not, in with the cool girls enough. And it's this dumb bullshit all the time. But it's intentional. It's not even a hypothesis at this point. It's a theory. It's been tested. It's been proven. It's there that these people are fucking this place up because it gives them gain, because it makes it seem like the party is edgier now, because it gives them their fucking money, their position, their power, their whatever, but not principle. They don't give a fuck about that. They are sacrificing principle in the name of position, profit, and power. That's it. And when you end up with these people, you end up with these people like concealing the truth. You end up with these people trying to censor and silence those who are willing to call any of it out. Like, yeah, like you've seen a dramatic drop in your numbers when you started to call these people out, and so did I. And to be frank, anyone who gets into contact with me in a positive way is now fucking radioactive on their own, because I'm verboten. I'm pariah. People are told not to talk to me. People are told that I'm an evil piece of shit, even though pretty much everything I've said has been proven right or provable when I said it. Like, so when it comes down to it, it's a matter of these people did this so that they could get their exclusive club. They didn't do it so that they could like uproot the things which make clubs. They didn't do it to unseat the big club. They did it so that they could be in the big club and wield the big club. And they don't fucking care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about the common fucking person, especially if they're a minority. They care about, like, fucking advancing their fucking position, collecting more power, and getting more people on board with their sociopathic garbage. It sucks because it's not what liberty is, but it's what it's like. It's what it looks like to anybody who comes along. So,
yeah, especially with Rechtenwald, somebody who is not only not exciting, because I think people will get excited about like Dave Smith, right? And that's who they assume. Dave Smith, Spike Cohen, that was supposed to be the presidential ticket, right? People that at least generate some excitement. Now, whether we like these, like them, that's a totally separate story. But like, these people would have been exciting and would have drawn from whoever the Republican candidate was, right? Some right of center, either somebody like Dave Smith who takes the right-ish side on, social issues or human rights. But, combined with Spike Cohen, who generally just shies away from it nowadays, would have at least pulled some votes away from the right wing. And instead, who do they promote? Michael Rechtenwald, who cannot keep track of his lies. And I'm talking like 1 week to the next. Like, he's like, I never supported Donald Trump. And people are like, did you not think that this very public interview was going to, like, that this would not be found? He said he never, not just didn't say, like, since becoming that, he said he never wrote that Republicans should build Trump's border wall. And he said just 8 months ago, like, they should close the border by completing the border wall and expelling illegal immigrants. Like, he said it. And then he's like, no, I never said that. But then also I'm going to reshare this, like, kind of close the border thing. And it's like, the guy, like, he's waffling so bad. Like, and he's not exciting. Like, if somebody's going to waffle, at least have it be because they said fiery things that contradicted each other. But he is so boring and so uninteresting. He's not going to pull from anybody. And I assume that that's why he has he's the Mises candidate. I don't know if officially, but I know that Heist stepped down from like treasurer or whatever so that he could work on Rechtenwald's campaign. I'm sure there's some kind of official technical jargon with it. I said, I'm not with the LP anymore. I'm only seeing what's in public. But that seems to be apparently their candidate is Rechtenwald, and he would just pull nothing. And that would have to be intentional, because you could choose a random libertarian from convention and get somebody who's more exciting than Rechtenwald and also doesn't struggle with like constantly contradicting themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just, I don't, to me, that type of selection seems very intentional, to say like, hey, this is somebody who's not going to pull 1% in a general election. Let's put him forward, to be uninspired. And then we've done the job of making the Libertarian Party uninspired so that the major right-wing people can continue operating the way that they operate. I don't have any dog in the fight, in the sense that, like, if Trump wins, I live a very privileged life in that I am financially secure. I have great health. And most of the people that are close to me at this stage wouldn't be affected dramatically by Trump or Biden one way or the other. But I understand that a lot of people are. If you have, I mean, some people just culture alone, if you know a trans child that his parents are feeling empowered, I mean, you'd be praying for Biden, even though he's not great on the issue, just for that kind of cultural shift to be like, hey, your way is not popular anymore. And similarly, like I have a friend out here who is a lesbian. She's great. She's so funny. Um, I, I love her a lot. But she, as a business owner, like when Trump cut like the corporate tax, on her business down by like 13%, by 13%, not to that. We should all be so lucky. But when it gets cut down that much, that was just so much more that she was able to put into her business and for her, like money for her and for it's small business, it's just her and her wife. And like for those two together. And so I understand why she supports why Trump and Biden is the difference between life and death for her. It's the difference between food on her table or not. Now, I'm fortunate to not be in that situation personally. But do I know somebody whose life will go under Trump or Joe Biden? Sure. But the two, it's basically choosing which of my friends get screwed and which ones survive. And so I'm not saying all this to be like, because I think, unfortunately, part of the way the criticism goes wrong of the Mises Caucus and this and of the right-wing libertarians is that it comes off as a defense for left-leaning libertarians, or I'm sorry, not left-leaning libertarians, for the lefty authoritarianism. And I just want to be clear that I view Donald Trump and Joe Biden as about amounts of evil. They are worse or better on given subjects, but they both hurt so many people that to me, analyzing which one hurts more people is difficult to tell. So I don't say all this. I know I've laid out this elaborate plan about how it helps, like, not just Donald Trump, but kind of the GOP, the established, the globalist right wing. And I've laid all this out because I think that that's intentional and that's the process that's being done. But I don't say that because it's like, no, my precious global left wing that I love so much. No, I dislike those guys very much. I'm just simply observing what's happening. And that seems to be the case. I really don't have a dog in the fight. So I don't want this to come off as like, oh, of course you're biased because you love your lefties so much. I can assure you that's not the case. I am very anti-Marxist. I believe that libertarian socialism and anarcho-communists exists, but I think much like the ANCAPs that sold their ideology out, I think that a lot of times you do some digging in the ANCOMs, and you find that most of them tend to be okay with a lot of bad statism or bad practices. And that's unfortunate that it's there. But it is not something that I have a blind spot to. So I just want to throw that disclaimer in there in case somebody's listening and they're like, well, Hodes, you're a left-leaning libertarian or something like that. I assuredly am not. I am always in the bottom right quadrant whenever I take, the little tests. So that's where I am.
Yeah, so my thing here is, and I said this on a recent appearance on this other channel, The Essential Libertarians, we went into what wokeness is. And to me, I think that, the only real way, because the whole idea of woke is just being aware of systemic injustice. That's the general, woke, rubric. If you're aware of systemic injustice, then you're woke on some level. So libertarians siding with the anti-woke people have to inherently, on some level, they have to oppose that analysis of systemic injustice. They have to say, no, in fact, there's no systemic injustice here, and here's all the ways that we're going to try and prove that. And in the fucking in the case of people like Dave Smith and Rechtenwald, they're on the same page with the anti-woke stuff. If you, for instance, go to Twitter right now and you fucking look up /comic Dave Smith trans or /wreck the regime trans, they're basically the same on this issue. And they're accepting the like whatever boilerplate shit against trans people they can. Um, you know, the only one exception to this, the one exception to this, in all of these tweets, um, is from Dave Smith. And that is one exception where he said if someone walked up to a trans person and told him to kill himself, and the trans person slapped the shit out of that guy, I'd cheer. That is the one exception. But meanwhile, he's supporting every single element of the anti-trans mentality. Um, like, the bathroom issue, the sports issue, the, indoctrinating our kids and being anti-family issue, the they're just a distraction issue, the all of this, all of this, all of this. Um, they don't need trans rights. They already have all the rights, despite all this legislation coming down the pike against them specifically. That's just, it's one of my benchmarks here. It's one of my sort of like yardsticks, is how do you handle that issue? And meanwhile, Rechtenwald is the same kind of person. And he has this one tweet where he says the last 4 mass shooters have been trans. That's a fucking lie, Michael. That's a fucking lie. Never, ever, ever in America have 4 mass shooters in a row been trans. Never, never. There have been 4 maybe total. And like one of the people you could mention wasn't actually trans, and she turned out to be a Nazi, and it wasn't a mass shooting either. That was Lakewood, and the only people who actually shot anyone were the cops shooting her and getting her kid in the crossfire that she used as a human shield. That's who we're talking about here. And these people will just ignore reality. They will flatly ignore reality when it's right in front of their face. And they'll pretend that these people are a part of this brutal, violent, blah, blah, blah. They're not. It's not true. It's not happening. It's just fiction. It's bullshit. And, these people are all on board with that. So are so many other people in these allegedly libertarian spaces. Fucking bullshit. And this is the place we're at. We're at this place because so many people have made these concessions to the right, and now if you don't cuck to them on the fucking trans issue, if you're not willing to say, that trans people are the worst thing ever, you don't get airtime. If you're not willing to say that Texas has a right to defend itself by pushing families into razor wire, that blacks are the biggest criminals in society, that blah blah blah. If you're not willing to say that, then you have to you're barred, you're banned. And so, for instance, if you say to somebody that Michael Rechtenwald should have shut the fuck up and not said that the last 4 mass shooters have been trans, when they haven't been. They have never been 4 trans mass shooters in a row. That's never happened, I think, anywhere, much less America. When you have these people spreading this alarmist terrorist fear of these people, when you're doing the same exact thing that George W. Bush did with Muslims, with trans people in America, when you're doing the same shit that the neocons did for years, but you've picked a different target that's more convenient to you, I don't care about your views on liberty. I don't care that you think you're a libertarian. I don't care that you think you're supporting anarchy. You're not. You're a sellout, hack, grifter, statist, anti-woke con man. And I fucking hate everything you stand for. Especially when you're going to ignore it in your own camp. When Nick Fuentes, when you're going to say, trans people are groomers, but you're going to back Nick Fuentes when he says he wants a pristine, untouched, innocent 16-year-old girl. Go fuck yourself. When you're going to support, this anti-trans narrative while saying H. Pearl Davis is based when she sings against Holocaust originalism, where she's going to say that she believes more and more of the conspiracy theories about how Hitler was a good guy, per the day. And when you're going to say that all this is based, and so is her views on men and women and LGBT and all this stuff, and then she says 16-year-olds are hotter than 26-year-olds, and you're not going to say anything about that, go fuck yourself. When you're not going to say anything about prominent podcasters because you want their reach. For instance, getting with a 15-year-old girl and then waiting until that 15-year-old girl is 17 and like pushing her into your sex business, flying her over to your country where it's legal, then, you know, go fuck yourself. If you're going to support, you know, another person who had 15-year-old girl on the brain and allegedly mentored her to the extent where, you know, the family of this person is tweeting about how you were having sexual conversations with her over the phone when you were in your mid-20s and she was 15, Tom Woods. Maybe this is the mentality we shouldn't be encouraging and we should be comfortable speaking against. And the fact that we aren't is because of the chilling effect that these people have on libertarian circles. This is a problem. It's a problem that goes deeper every single time you look at it. And this is the core issue, I think, is that everybody's got their stupid little cult, their stupid little echo chamber, their stupid little grifting ring wank. It doesn't matter what reality is. It doesn't matter what truth is. It doesn't matter what liberty is. What matters is that you can scare people about the people you can use as fucking scapegoats and fucking whipping boys. That's what matters.
Yeah, there's like you said, even if I was on the side of like transgenderism as mental illness, let's just say that I am, it would still be very normal for me to be like, hey, we got 4 mass shootings in a row that were all from trans people. For me to be like, hey, that's not true, right? Like, it's just not. Like you said, functionally is not, regardless of your opinion on the matter, it's not. So it would be very normal for me to say that. So when people are or if they fact check it, because here's the other issue I've had with this right-leaning strain, is they'll go after like Reason and Cato, and who are not perfect. I mean, it's a bunch of writers with a bunch of different opinions. I remember they talk about who they're voting for, and some were like voting stupid, and some were like, I'm not voting for either, and some were like, I'm voting for the Libertarian, and some went with the Democrats and with the Republican. I mean, we're talking about a lot of different people. So obviously I have different, you know, I can't summarize all of them. But I remember there was just one like fact-checking Vivek Ramaswamy and his fibs about January 6th. And if I had a friend who was like, can't you just take like a bold stance? It's not that this isn't true. It's just not bold enough when you like call him out for lying about January 6th. And I'm just like somebody on the left. And I just literally went to Reason's website, found the most recent, just went to the most recent articles page. There was like 8 of them that was dunking on the left, just linked them right in there. And like, these are all from like the last week. Like, this is not, your mentality is that even one person criticizes factually somebody who was lying about January 6th. And your first instinct is like, yeah, that person lied, but come on, be bold. Like, going after the left wing is bold. Going after the right wing is super not. And I like, it was just this mentality. And the thing is it was shared by a lot of people. Like this idea that yeah, the person lied and they told a lot of lies about January 6th, but you should let them get away with it, please, because it's really, you know, that would be the more bold thing to do, is to let them lie. But like, even letting people lie to you, as I said earlier, this directly leads to statism, because if you develop a culture that accepts lies, you will get a politics that accept lies. That is like statism in a nutshell, right? If I was going to like leave the audience with something positive, it's something that you just touched on now, which is like, there's a lot, while I am kind of establishing a lot of boundaries, I don't want the idea of who a libertarian person is to ever become a stereotype. Like, because when we talk about anarcho-coalitionism, that can look like so many different people. So I have been critical about what not to do. But I don't want you to think that my idea of a libertarian, specifically the audience, because I know you know this about me, Jeremy, but I don't want the audience to think that this is something that I have a limited idea of who can be a libertarian. Because I hate that. Like this, like very limited, like who counts as an anarchist and who counts as a libertarian is this like small, tiny little fraction. Oh, those aren't the real ones. Those aren't the real ones. What I would prefer to do, what I find is beneficial about coalitionism, is looking at all the things that, hey, since we've left war aside, let's talk about how many different ways we can maintain the peace. There are millions and billions of ways, and you can't do all of them. I don't even know what all of them are, but there are many different ways that help promote peace, and we can do all of them together. We can't do any one of them alone. But we can do all of them together, right? People get passionate about peace and how we maintain the peace and researching. I mean, this is a class I took. It was so profound when I got my degree in theology. This class on like the writings of Martin Luther King Jr. and his inspirations and the difference between peaceful and nonviolent protest and the importance of like being a peacemaker and all these great things, that there's so many different ways to do it. When we talk about healing, that's not one-dimensional. You could be a doctor. You could be somebody who works at a food shelter. You could be somebody who opens a veterinary clinic. Like, there are many different... One of the issues I have is when I say we need to leave sin behind, right? We need to leave evil behind, hate behind. We need to stop towing this line of what hate and evil and sin is. And we've done a pretty good job this episode, I think, of laying out a lot of what those mistakes are when we toe that line or when we get close to that point. So I've told you what it's not. But what it is, while I've kind of put in a box what is not, what it is, what liberty is would take the rest of our lives to discuss, because it could be anything. Mm-hmm. What you have to offer the world could be anything.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you are so good about bullying bullies. And I wish that there were more people who said, I'm not backing down from the bullies like you do. But that's just one facet of you. And that's one facet of what needs to be done. Like so many other things need to be done. Jeremy's amazing at research and standing up to the bullies. And, giving you hardcore radical libertarian libertarian ideology. But there is another aspect. There are millions of other aspects and applications of how we bring people into this radical liberty, radical anarchist movement. And it's a beautiful spectrum. I could specifically target the GSM community, or even one aspect of the GSM community, like lesbianism or gays or trans, right? I could focus on that. I could focus on one aspect of liberty, like immigration. But even within immigration, I could talk about what's happening at the border and all the people, committing sexual misconduct at the border and how they're getting moved around and try to put a stop to that. I could put eyes on Farmington and fake universities that they've established to bring people over only to deport them so that they can increase their budget. I could do that. I could also visit. I could take pictures. I could discuss it with my family. I think we shouldn't underestimate how starts within your home and saying like, hey, I'm going to live the libertarian life, not just as a philosophy, but as a lifestyle, and live that at home, and then let that could start doing that at work. These don't always have to be big things. They might just be what we discuss. If that's all you have the time and energy for, I completely understand. This system is designed to keep you tired and fat and lazy and sick. I do believe all of those things, that it can be very difficult. But whatever you have to give with what little energy you've got left over, I truly believe that love is a well that doesn't run dry. And I think liberty is well within that spectrum of love. And that you will find that once you get started, you will find the energy to do what you have to do within that coalition. And some people can argue that something is more good than another. For example, finding a cure to cancer is much more important than having a local animal shelter. But both are important and both help somebody and both are good things. You don't have to constantly be focused on doing the most good all of the time. Even Christ didn't focus on doing what was most good all of the time. He focused on doing good. And that's good enough. And that good can be whatever you are individually good at. So like if you're an anarchist and you're looking to be part of a coalition, I've listed a lot of what not to do, but that can feel negative and weighty and gatekeepy. What I'd rather focus on is what you can do. And that's one of so many millions of things that I don't even know about. That's looking at, I think one of the things for libertarians is we don't look at personality types enough. That libertarians sometimes have like a monopoly on like 3 different personality types because we cater to those types so well. And we don't cater at all to other people. And we need to learn to do that. And maybe that's you to say, man, I really love tradition. Libertarians kind of tend to be anti-tradition. Maybe I'm somebody who can reach the people who do care about tradition. And there's a beautiful thing there, because I'm not trying to keep the people who love tradition out, just like I'm not trying to keep the people who love progression out. These aren't at conflict. I find a lot of freedom fighting to be a tradition. I find a lot of loving your family to be a tradition. I find that there's a lot of good traditions that we can establish. Of course, a lot of breaking the cycle as well. And so if you find yourself on I want to focus on the radically social progressive side, great. There's a place for you there. You want to focus on the ANCOM side, but be more serious about the anarchist part and hold the actual, the ANCOMs who kind of drop their mask and are actually authoritarian communists or socialists. I want to hold them accountable and I want to fix things up here. My personal role within the anarchy movement is within faith, right? That's very particular to me. That's my area of study. And that's what to me, that I have such a connection to it. It really sparks me. And those are the people that I tend to reach more to. But that's not even close to anybody. I have somebody who practiced he pronounced Sikhism, I guess is how it's pronounced. I pronounced it Sikhism my whole life, and apparently I've been doing that wrong. But he's Sikh, and he loves to witness to a very specific group of people that are students, because he finds the student of theology is very that and liberty are inextricably tied together, the freedom to learn and freedom itself. And he is so good at witnessing to these people, but sometimes we'll have Christians that he sends my way, and sometimes I'll have non-Christians I send his way. And that's what makes it a coalition, is by being strong at different various things. So I don't want anybody listening to this to just think like, oh man, this just sounds like a bunch of landmines to look out for. Because really, it really is more like a line that when you distance yourself from it, you'd have to go a long way to get back to that line. When we detail it all out like this, it can sound like a minefield, but it's like all the minefield is over a mile that way, and I can keep going another 20 miles this way, and then another 20 miles that, and another 20 miles after that. So to the point where people are talking about all the bad stuff associated with libertarians, and I'm like, I left that behind. I'm not even close. I don't flirt with that anymore. That's in a totally different side of the hemisphere of what I'm on right now. And I encourage people to think more like that, to leave all the terrible things behind and embrace all the great parts of liberty, because there sure are a lot of them. There's a lot of great people. You've got a role within liberty. If you are listening to this, I know you do. You've got something to offer the liberty movement and the being part of the anarcho coalition. And I think you will love it. Whatever your role may be, you don't have to be Jeremy and I love Jeremy so much. My feeds knows that I love him, and so it puts him near the top. Thankfully, the algorithm only suppresses you some days of the week, so I don't see everything, but I see enough. But we are nothing alike, if I'm going to tell you the truth, personality-wise.
I'm a fucking cynical, negative, pessimistic asshole.
Right. I'm even correcting myself. I'm like, was butt munch too harsh a word? Yep. And so Jeremy and I aren't really a lot alike, but we are absolutely on the same team. And there's a unity and a freedom and a friendship there that you can have with that ordinarily you might not see the possibility for it now. So just get invested in it, whether it's I would heavily suggest being a part of Jeremy's group, Jeremy has a great job. His Discord has a lot of like, hey, whatever your passions are, find something like that. And you can even find your own group, and you're sure to find links to other libertarians outside of those circles who also are passionate about everything from Dungeons and Dragons to, Austrian economics. You're gonna find it there. And maybe your role is just bringing the great news of liberty to your Dungeons and Dragons sessions. It could be anything. I can't stress that enough, that we have spent a lot of time talking about what not to do, but that Jeremy and I both spend probably the bulk of our time thinking about what we can do. And that really is that's how you find liberty even in a land of slavery, is to realize that there's so much that you can do, that you can fight this war on so many different fronts, that you are not a foot soldier in this army. Every man is going to be his own admiral, and you will love it when you find your role there. So yes, there's a lot of problem with the liberty movement right now. If we end up having to if we have to drop names, that's fine. If all of a sudden the term liberty or libertarianism or anarchy or whatever becomes so toxic that we just can't do it anymore, that's okay. We've still got the philosophy, regardless of whatever they decide to call it, and it's always going to be beautiful. And I don't mind changing the name if that's what keeps it great. I'm happy to be there. Jeremy, I appreciate you letting me get through all my notes and everything. It's been an awesome conversation with you, man.
Yeah, and also, so we've got somebody in chat right now, Christ brings a sword, and he says, America is dead. America is full of embalmer clots, and is a zombie of its former self. The destruction of America is certain. Judgment is coming, you can count on it. The Christians are going to leave shortly, and you can do whatever you want. First off, that ain't the way to preach. If you want to get people on your side pretending that they don't have a point because the Christians are the only thing standing between us and what we want, that's garbage. Especially since we've been pretty much, like, the Bible reifies what we've been saying this episode. So I think that Christ might bring a sword, but you might be on the wrong end of it, sir. But the ultimate variety here is that, like, we don't need to agree on approach. And, certainly I have the worst negative approach. We're gonna die. Like, I say that, we're heading for a brutal, and, like, I've said this countless times, I'm not reading a script. We're heading for a brutal and bloody apocalypse, and Armageddon and fire and fucking rivers of blood and years of darkness, the likes of which will make Revelations look like a children's story. We're heading for evil, tyranny, fucking AI dystopia, fucking technocratic, like, practically Satanist garbage. And if you want to hear more about this, nearly a year ago, Hodey and I recorded an episode on Agorist Nexus podcast called Rejecting Earthly Kings. It was episode 145. You can go listen to that, and you will find that we've been pretty consistent on these issues for this whole time. And, like, it's not anti-Christian to support the truth. In fact, the truth shall set you free. That's the whole point. So if you're going to say that because we've been speaking the truth about these issues that we somehow stand at odds with Christ, I think you're one of the people perverting the message of the Bible, and that your name is stricken from the book of life should you not repent. That's my fucking belief. You can continue to spread your bigoted garbage, but I don't have to accept it, and nobody should. So that's my response to you in chat. And, like, ultimately, there's places for everybody in these circles. But, like, if you're going to say that we are somehow wrong, despite being unable to disprove us, then you're not part of these circles, because you're not trying to support reason. You're not trying to support people's ability to understand the world around them. You're occluding it. You're keeping them safe from the things that might make them against you. And that being in and of itself, like, a key component of the occult, a key component of the secret societies that run this fucking joint, that makes you just as bad as the enemy you claim to fight. So when I say what I say, what I'm trying to say is that, like, if you want to say that I am wrong, prove it. Go for it. I am 100% open to anything I say being wrong. I am a methodological solipsist. I think that there's a possibility that my entire conception and understanding of everything as it stands is false, and I could just be like some consciousness floating in a void somewhere, or a brain in a jar, or this is the Matrix, or whatever. I don't fucking care. I don't think that that's the case. I'm, still learning the rules of this simulation and trying to live by them to the best of my goals. But at the same time, like, it's possible that it is. And so there's a possibility I could be completely full of shit. There's a possibility I could be wrong about fucking everything. So if you have proof, prove it. I am all ears. But if all you're going to do is be sanctimonious, that's exactly the kind of problem libertarian circles have. They're very good at making these emotionally impactful statements, and certain people within these circles are very okay with those emotionally impactful statements substituting reality, truth, reason, logic, empathy, everything that they would need in order to reach more people. And then they wonder, well, why don't I have ballot access? Maybe because people don't give a shit about a movement that doesn't give a shit about them. Maybe that's what should change. And Hodey is great at trying to help with that. Hodey is great at coming at Christianity and libertarianism from the perspective of somebody who wants that to change. So I am glad that he joined me today, and this should be we had a few sort of audio glitches, but it should be a good conversation to sort of push this forward. And I'm going to try to get on as many people as possible to discuss these issues from this perspective, because there are these problems that we need to correct, and if we don't, we are absolutely fucked. We are all going to die in chains, and your children will not know liberty. Your children will not know prosperity, and you will not know neither during your lifetimes. That is where we are headed, and if we don't put the brakes on this, nobody will. Nobody's going to do it for us. We got to do it ourselves, and we got to do it now. So, with that being said, is there anything you want to plug before you book?
No, if you are a person of faith, I'm currently most involved with the Love First Christians. You can just search us out. Our Discord link is permanent and everywhere. I believe I have it in my stuff. I'm Hodey Johns. You can find me on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere I'm not getting kicked off these days. I am a pretty... I've kind of shifted from politics to culture, but I'd love to hear from you. Even if you disagree with something I said, as long as like the conversation's respectful, I tend to welcome. I find that I change so rapidly year to year, usually growing, hopefully not regressing too much, but I change so much that I'm willing to kind of put my own views under the microscope and think I wouldn't be where I'm at if I wasn't capable of change. So I'd appreciate, any input you have, any discussions you want to have. If anything I said doesn't sound quite right, please talk with me. Or if you just want to get in touch and say that you loved everything, I like that even better. So let me know. But yeah, Hodey Johns, Hodey on social media. Again, that's the Love First Christians. If you ever want a Discord invite, just let me know and I'll shoot you one.
Yeah, and like, just to be clear, fact check us. Like, if you have something that you think we got wrong, do it. If you have anything on my channel, do it. Do it. But do not interfere with the process if that's what's happening. If somebody has truth and liberty in mind, don't get in their way, or you're an enemy of both. With that,
yep. Hey.
Go.
No, I was just saying, yep, fact check me. I may be wrong. I've been fact checked and been wrong before, and I appreciate knowing when I'm usually I'll learn that I'm using a faulty source, or that sometimes my bias gets the better of me and I had a blind spot on something. So I have no problem admitting when I'm wrong. And if you are constantly used to dealing with people who have a tough time admitting when they're wrong, it might be nice to talk to Jeremy or talk to me and kind of understand what it's like to the empowerment that comes with understanding that you can be wrong about things. It is scary, but conversely, you will feel stronger by being willing to be wrong. We are in the world and not of the world, and part of that means messing up. If you lock yourself in a closet, you will never sin until and then you'll starve to death, and it'll be over. The point isn't never to make mistakes. The point is to make mistakes and learn and grow from them. So that's, I know you always welcome a good fact check. Like, Jeremy, If I had one person to be fact checker in chief on the planet, it would be you. But even you would be welcome to fact check, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, because facts are what's core to that. If they're not, then it just becomes propaganda. Like, and we could do a whole new episode on fact checking specifically. So maybe that'll be something on a separate thing. We can talk about the corruption in the fact checking industry, maybe on the Agorist Nexus podcast. But like, there's like, if you've got a problem, let me know, because the only way forward is through a mature and reasonable conversation. And if we're not able to have that, the only way forward is war. And that's never going to end well for the people who oppose the war machine. The war machine will always crush us in the end, and it will always lift up the people who are going to expand its power and borders and position. So we got to do better than them on both a philosophical and cultural level, or we are fucked. So anyway, thank you for coming on. And this is episode 1. If there's somebody you want on, let them know. If there's somebody you want on who has like problems with the way that liberty has been being handled, let them know. We can maybe get some conversations going here, because I think that that's what's necessary. So with all that being said, this has been Real Libertarians 1. Smash the fucking state. One moment. We be waiting for the